right. Thank you, Mayor Heading. I have my devices rolling, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, and good evening. This is the City of Morro Bay City Council meeting. This is a regular meeting being held Tuesday, November 9th, 2021. It is 5:30 p.m. and this meeting is being held via teleconference. Pursuant to Executive Order number N08-21 issued by Governor Newsom on June 11, 2021, this meeting will be conducted telephonically through Zoom and broadcast live on cable channel 20 and streamed on the city website. Please be advised that pursuant to the executive order and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, the Veterans Hall will not be open for this meeting. Thank you very much, and I will ask our clerk to establish a quorum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Addis?
Here.
Councilmember Barton?
Here.
Councilmember Ford?
Here.
Councilmember Heller?
Here.
And Mayor Heading?
Present. Thank you. We do have a quorum. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask that in your own way, you take a moment of silence, remembering those in special need. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're back. And if we could have our flag, we'll go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thanks for that. And I'll ask our city attorney, Chris, do we have a closed session report this evening?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. No closed session items to report tonight.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That brings us to mayor and council members' reports this evening. I wanted to start with a recognition of some significant public health issues that I know if you are certainly watching the media, news media, social media, etc., you have noted that since this pandemic has begun, there has been a significant uptick or rise in mental health related issues. There are significant numbers of changes in the case rate for drug dependency, alcoholism, access to mental health services, syndromes such as anxiety, depression, manic depressive illness, etc., at levels such that we've never seen. And San Luis Obispo County is no different. It's important for us to note that there are resources available, not only during regular hours of the day when you might need to call to access mental health services, but also if you or a loved one are in crisis, there are crisis services that are available 24/7. And I wanted to just provide you that information, realizing that at any time, any of us individually, any of our loved ones around us, and perhaps even our neighbors or friends may need to access these services significantly because of the impacts of COVID-19 and all of the outfall that has resulted from this terrible pandemic. For easy access to all behavioral health services in the county, you can go to the website SLOCOUNTY, SLOCOUNTY.ca.gov. And if you click on the Behavioral Health Services icon or area, they will take you to a listing of all of the mental health services in the county that are available to us as citizens and residents. That's SLO County, SLOCOUNTY.ca.gov, and you click on the behavioral health button. The phone number for general services, this is not the crisis number, these are for general services for San Luis Obispo County Behavioral Health Agency. If you're in need of mental health services, alcohol, substance abuse services, etc., that number is 800-838-1381. Let me repeat that. That number is 800-838-1381. And the Behavioral Health Center for San Luis Obispo County is located at 2180 Johnson Avenue in San Luis Obispo. And let me give you perhaps the most important number. This is the crisis hotline number. This number is available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. If you or a loved one or somebody you know is in mental health crisis and needs immediate assistance, the crisis line is 800-783-0607. I'll repeat that. This is the crisis line for mental health, substance abuse, related types of issues. 800-783-0607. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. Please keep these numbers close and handy. You never know when a loved one or a family member or somebody close in our community might need to access these services. Thank you for that, and I'll move to Councilmember Addis for your announcements, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for sharing that information. I did want to say thank you to those that attended Afternoons with Addis on November 1st. I had Michelle Shoresman from Women in the Pipeline, and that video is up on my Facebook, Addis for the Central Coast, or Dawn Addis City Council. For anyone who's interested in running for office, I hope you'll take a look there. And then on November 10th, right after the City Goals meeting, from 6 to 7 p.m., Women's March San Luis Obispo is hosting a town hall with Congressman Carbajal via Zoom. So if you're interested, I hope you RSVP'd already. I think we were filling up quickly yesterday, so would love to see everyone there. And that's it for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Addis. Councilmember Barton, please. Any announcements this evening?
No announcements, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Heller. Any announcements, sir?
Yes, I would like to personally thank our city manager, Scott Collins, and our new public works director, Greg Kwolek, for all the time they spend on weekends picking up trash. I hear they actually enjoy it, which warms my heart. I enjoy it as well. And the fact that they do this sets a great example for the community. And there are so many community members that I see around town, residential areas and commercial areas, that are out either sweeping their sidewalks or picking up trash without being asked and without being recognized. And the community pride that the individuals and our staff members and elected officials have in keeping the city clean is quite impressive, and I challenge any city on the coast of California to match our level of effort in that regard. I also would like to thank those 9 or 10 folks that came to Del Mar Park last Saturday morning and joined me as we talked about my favorite subject, which is what you do with your food waste and how you can possibly live without a garbage disposal. And it was, because it was a fairly small group, it was very informal, and we shared stories about the trials and tribulations of dealing with fruit flies while trying to divert organic waste from the landfill. So it actually was quite fun and interesting. And if you actually are interested in this topic and would like to hear more, please reach out to me, 805-471-11257, or jheller@morrowbayca.gov. Always love to talk about trash. Thank you very much. That's what I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller, for being our trash expert. We appreciate it. Councilmember Ford, any announcements?
Yeah, I just have one quick one, Mayor. Thank you for asking. It's regarding the Thanksgiving dinner at the Morro Bay. Let's see here. It's Morro Bay Community's Thanksgiving dinner on November 25th. It's put on by the Morro Bay Lions Club, and it's called Cruisin' Thanksgiving 2021. They're currently accepting donations from our community if you're interested in helping support that cause. Quite a few organizations and businesses around town are supporting it. But this year, there will be curbside to-go meals for free. You can drive up or you can walk up. It's from 1 to 3 o'clock, again on November 25th, from 1 to 3 p.m. And it will be located at the Morro Bay Community Center, which is at 1001 Kennedy Way here in Morro Bay. And they're also offering a free home delivery from noon to 1:30 p.m. And you can call the number if you're interested in that home delivery. The phone number is 805-772-4421. And if you're interested in more information, you can always go to morrowbaylions.com to get more information on that. So I welcome anyone who would like to get a warm meal on that day to please take advantage of it. And if you want to support the cause, please consider making a donation. All right, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Councilmember Ford, how do we make donations to that? Is there a number, or go to the website?
Sorry, I'm muted.
No worries.
Sorry about that. You can. I'm sure you can find more information on the website, but it does say here on their poster that you can send a check to Morro Bay Lions Foundation, and under the memo line, write food group, and the address is P.O. Box 343, Morro Bay, California 93443. And you would, you'd send it to Morro Bay Lions Foundation. Yep,
great.
No problem.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that very much. And Mr. Collins, please, your report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the shout out from Councilmember Heller, but all credit goes to Public Works Director Greg Quallick, who hasn't missed a Sunday, I think, this entire summer. I had to stand down a few weekends, but he's been very consistent. We enjoy, that's where we do our one-on-one meetings and meet people and learn a lot about trash. Still have a lot to learn from Councilmember Heller on trash. But basically, on the vein of Councilmember Ford, I wanted to bring to our attention a community that we will be having some holiday events the first weekend of December. Thanks to Kirk Carmichael and his team of Recreation Services, we'll have some fun events around tree lighting, as well as the Rotary Morro Bay, the Lighted Boat Parade, Breakfast with Santa, etc. We'll have a lot more information on the city website coming out soon, but just wanted to tip our hat to that, looking forward, and especially say thanks to Kirk and his team. And that's all I have for now. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott. Very much appreciate that. And with that brings us to our presentations for this evening. And Dana, is Tina with us this evening?
Yes, she is. Thank you for joining us, Tina.
Great. And Tina, I'm going to try to say your last name, and correct me if I'm wrong. Swithin?
Yes.
Hey, I was pretty good. Thank you. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
This is Family Court Awareness Month, and we do have a proclamation for you. And it's my pleasure to present this proclamation to you. This is a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Morro Bay, recognizing November as Family Court Awareness Month. And it reads as follows: whereas the mission of One Mom's Battle, or OMB, and the Family Court Awareness Month Committee is to increase awareness on the importance of a family court system that prioritizes child safety and acts in the best interest of children. And whereas the mission of the FCAMC is to increase awareness on the importance of education and training on domestic violence, childhood trauma, and post-separation abuse for all professionals working within the family court system, and whereas the mission at the FCAMC is to educate judges and other family court professionals on the empirical data and research that is currently available. Such research is a critical component of making decisions that are truly in the best interests of children. This research includes the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That was a Kaiser Permanente study, the Sanders Family U.S. Department of Justice study, the Meyer study, child custody outcomes in cases involving abuse allegations, and the Santa Clara Law Study, confronting the challenge of high conflict personality in family court. And whereas the mission at the FCAMC is fueled by the desire for awareness and change in the family court system, while honoring the 100 plus children in the United States who have been murdered by a parent after a custody court rejected the other parent's plea for protection. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Morro Bay City Council does hereby recognize the extremely important work done by FCAMC and the OMB, and hereby proclaims the month of November to be Family Court Awareness Month. And Tina, would you like to say a few words on behalf of the organization? And welcome.
I absolutely would. First, thank you. My name is Tina Swithin. I'm a local author, advocate, and creator of Family Court Awareness Month. And I entered the family court system right here in San Luis Obispo County 12 years ago, believing that child safety would be the priority. That just seems like common sense. But what I discovered, and what so many other thousands of others discover around the country, is that parental rights are currently trumping child safety. My children are finally safe, and I know that we are very lucky. But I will say that had the courts listened to me and heard me from day one, it would have spared myself and my daughters 6 years of severe trauma. No one wants to be validated that they are right in the family court system. It comes at a great cost. What a lot of people don't, are shocked to hear is that most family court judges have no training in domestic violence or trauma. And because domestic violence is about power and control, that doesn't just vanish when the relationship ends. It transfers into the family court system, where our children become the pawns. So I am absolutely grateful to the city of Morro Bay for standing with us to recognize the importance of a family court system that prioritizes our children and prioritizes child safety, because as we all know, our children are the future, and we need to protect them.
Thank you so much for not only raising our awareness, but for your advocacy, leadership, and your example. We thank you so much for being here tonight, and are proud to be able to offer up this proclamation in reference to the awareness of Family Court Awareness Month. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right, that moves us to public comment. This is general public comment for items on the agenda for which you cannot stay and you'd like to speak to now, or anything else you'd like to address to the City Council. Again, this is general public comment for items that are on the agenda for which you can't stay to speak to, and or anything generally you'd like to address to the city. The information, if you're watching, is on the screen on how to access public comment. And with that, Anthony, I'll go ahead and open up public comment, please.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I do see a raised hand. Betty Winholtz has her hand raised. Okay, Betty, I've unmuted you.
So welcome, Betty.
Good evening. This is Betty Winholtz. I have two comments I'd like to make tonight, and the first one is a sad one. Melody Demerit, who was a city council member back in the early 2000s, passed away last Thursday from cancer, and I just want to acknowledge her for the leadership that she offered during that time period, her great love of the environment, her great love of Morro Bay. She was a trash hero back in the day and strove to get the city to stop using chemicals on our grasses and the schools, on our lawns where the children played. She was very much for the earth. She was only 70 years old, and just want to have the community be aware that that leader has passed. The second item is I wrote an email over the weekend to both the city council and staff asking about the tree cutting in Bayshore City Park, and received no comment from anyone. So I would like a public explanation of what happened and how one can go in and do that kind of work in the midst of night herons who are nesting there. And so I'm anxious to hear what that has to say.
Thank you, Betty, and thank you for bringing the passing of Melody Demerit to our attention. We very much appreciate that, and thank you for those comments. Anthony, next public comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I see Linda Winters with her hand raised. Linda, okay. I am unmuting you. Go ahead.
Well, welcome, Linda.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, great. Greetings, Mayor, City Council members, and staff. It's Linda Winters, aka Mobile Home Linda. I'm back in action again, thanks to a certain wonderful member of our great community whose initials are Chuck Stoll from the Lions Club, and so many other service and benevolent agencies. He requested that I go around to our 15 mobile home parks and invite anyone within those parks to receive a dinner from the Morro Bay Community Thanksgiving dinner. When I woke up the morning after Halloween, Monday, November 1st, I realized, holy crap, there's only 24 more days till Thanksgiving. So I went around and visited 8 of the parks on the first day and 6 more on the second day of November. I can tell you how many of these people were so surprised to hear about the dinner. These are some of the most underserved folks in our community. It helped me to segue into another something that I've been trying to do for years now, building a line of communication between all of the park's residents. There are 2 other groups I really must mention. They both held Zoom or in-person meetings in the past 2 weeks. Firstly, Erica Crawford, who hosted the Morro Bay Shoulder Survey that featured Chief Jody Cox and Commander Amy Watkins, talking about ways to protect our businesses wisely. Good pointers were shared by all. Great job, Chiefs and Commander and Erica. The second forum was held by Council Member Jeff Heller about the recycling and waste management. We that attended, and I was one of the 9 or 10, learned a lot about what we should do and a lot more about what we shouldn't do with all of our waste materials. Boils down to educating everyone in our little town. Thanks, Jeff. That was really a great forum. Quickly, I urge everyone to invite as many people as you can to get their Thanksgiving dinners from the community dinner. Thank you, Jen, for mentioning that. My family will be here helping, and I hope yours does too. Happy Thanksgiving to all, and I am deeply saddened about the loss of our Melody Demerit. She was a very, very special lady. Thank you, Betty, for letting us know about that.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate it. Anthony, next public comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Currently, I do not see any hands left in the queue.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close general public comment and bring it back and ask either Mr. Kwalik or Mr. Collins regarding the tree cutting in the Bayshore City Park. Any comment?
Sure. Mr. Kwalik responded to Betty Winholtz's email at 9:28 or something around there Sunday morning. Sorry if you didn't receive that, Betty. Basically, on Friday afternoon, the city staff were made aware of a very large limb from the ground in Bayshore Park that was completely broken and resting its weight on an adjacent tree. The public works crew stepped into action and identified it as a severe hazard, and as such, the area under the limb was taped off Friday evening to protect the public. And we asked coastal tree experts to remove it as soon as safely and as soon as possible, which is what folks saw happening on Sunday. So that response did go out, but sorry if you did not receive that.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you addressing that. And that brings us to our consent agenda. This is item A on this evening's agenda. I'll go ahead and open up for consent agenda, public comment. This is public comment for items A1 through A10. Any member of the public wishing to speak to those items, public comment is now open again for the consent agenda. And Anthony, do we have any public comments, sir?
Thank you, Mayor Heading. Yes, I do see a hand raised. Don Maruska.
Okay.
Okay, Don, I have unmuted you.
Welcome, Don.
Let's see. All right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Appreciate this opportunity to comment on two items on your consent agenda. One is A7. This is a very important topic of redistricting that's going to affect our community for at least a decade. And it's critically important, therefore, that Morro Bay be active in that discussion. There are really, when you boil it all down with the various maps that are going around, there are two critical issues that are important for the city. One is retaining our coastal community of interest. That is a priority under the law that is above any jurisdictional boundaries, et cetera. And it's many of the maps are alternative maps are showing the North Coast being split up, which would be inappropriate and not legal. The second thing is criterion is that the maps cannot serve a partisan interest. This is an especially important issue because the board majority decided that it would make the district choices itself. This is in contravention of the advice from the League of Women Voters and the best practices for local government of creating an independent citizen commission. So this means that we as citizens and our elected officials need to give particular attention to the things that are being proposed and to speak out on them, as our only opportunity are the ones coming up. So really urge the council to insist that the Board of Supervisors retain the current legal and fair supervisorial districts, and that you be specific and clear about the proposed maps, in particular maps C, D, and the patent map, that do not satisfy the election code because they split up our communities of interest and they serve partisan purposes. There are many fast-moving pieces on this, so I encourage you to either empower the mayor or empower a subcommittee. The board is meeting next on November 19th, and then there'll just be the week of Thanksgiving between that and the board's final action on November 30th. So time is of the essence here to respond as quickly and practically as possible, and encourage you to do so. The second item I'd like to raise is A5, and just encourage you, since there is a public discussion hearing with the Department of Toxic Substance Controls on November 16th, if you might clarify for the public your rationale in having the action on A5 this evening before that informational opportunity becomes available. Thanks so much for your great work and your leadership for our city. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Don. Anthony, next public comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment for the consent agenda, bring it back to council. And Mr. Collins, any comment on A5 regarding Mr. Maruska's comment?
Yeah, good question by Mr. Maruska. It's based upon the fact we only have one council meeting this month, so we wouldn't have time to get comments to them otherwise, but it's a fair question.
Thank you. Appreciate that update. Council, I'll either entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, or if there's an item you'd like to pull, please let me know now.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
I'd like to pull A5.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the full consent agenda. Is there a second for that?
Did somebody want to pull something?
Yeah, I was going to ask you to amend what.
No.
Yeah.
If I got a second, I'd be happy to amend.
I'll second it and ask if you would, for a friendly amendment, to pull A5.
Happy to move the consent agenda except for A5.
And I'll second that. Any further discussion on those items? If not, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote on that, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for that. And Councilmember Heller, A5.
Thank you so much, Mayor. To follow up on Mr. Maruska's comment, the public input on this particular item, I believe, closes on December 9th. And while it makes sense to me that we received this report from staff, I'm not sure authorizing the mayor to sign a letter concurring with the revised remedy is appropriate, consider that public input is still open. And I'm wondering if, in fact, the city needs to submit a letter concurring with the proposed revised remedy, or can we just receive the report? Is there a need, legal or otherwise, that we need to concur with this report?
No, there isn't. And typically with public comment, they just receive the comment and then issue it in their report. There isn't typically a reflection on the public comment. So, that's at least how the process went last time when we took this over a year ago. But we did provide city's perspective on the initial, and so I think there was just follow up since they've revised the remedies at this point. But there is no legal purpose or reason to do so.
For me, frankly, I noticed some changes in the second report, and I haven't had a chance to really look at it or contact John Bystra and talk with him about it. So if it would be possible to receive the report and not send a letter concurring with it, I would appreciate that.
So this is a time important because of the fact that we do not have a second meeting this month. And I think that's the essence of this. But I do understand your concern. I do feel compelled, though, to go ahead and go along with the staff's recommendation in A5. So thank you, Councilmember Heller, but I'll move to approve A5.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mayor Heading to approve A5, second by Councilmember Addis. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote on A5, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
No.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item B-1. This is the first public hearing for this evening. And let me just get my notes here. The format for our public hearing will be the usual. We'll go ahead and have the staff presentation, followed by council questions and or answers. And then I will open up the public hearing and ask the appellant, Ms. Winholtz, to make her statement or statements, and also ask if the applicant after that would like to respond. And then I'll open up any general public comment from the public on the item. After that, I will close the public hearing and then bring it back to council for discussion and or action. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with the presentation. Cindy, welcome. This is item B-1, Appeal of Planning Commission Approval on September 7th, 2021 of the CDP, number CDP 21-019, and conditional use permit CUP 2105 for construction of a new 6-unit, 5,042 square foot Bluff-top Hotel at 205 Harbor Street in the CVS/PD zoning district. Property is also located in the Coastal Appeals jurisdiction. And thank you. Cindy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'll take a moment to share my screen now. Okay, there we go. So yes, this is an appeal of the Planning Commission's approval of the Coastal Development Permit and Conditional Use Permit for 205 Harbor Street. Before you on the screen, you see the project location. This is a street view image. The property is on Harbor Street, and it extends from Front Street to Market Avenue to the east, and then Pelican Place to the north, as you see in this image here. The project was approved by the Planning Commission on September 7th, 2021. We did receive an appeal of that Planning Commission action on September 17th, and the matter is before the council tonight for appeal of that PC approval. The project approval was for the new hotel. The mayor summarized that quite nicely, so I will skip over some of these bullet points. But this is the proposed development that you see before you on the screen. In addition, the hotel building construction, to elaborate, consists of 2 separate buildings detached with a view courtyard in the center of the property. The parking lot is also proposed to provide 7 on-site parking spaces with access from Market Avenue. And the buildings are proposed as a 1 single-story and 1 2-story. The project also includes a view courtyard and related guest amenities. These include the view courtyard, entry court, guest barbecue and a game lawn space, as well as the hotel laundry, guest laundry space, and full kitchen for each rooms. In addition, roof deck for guest use and semi-private patios. The hotel room sizes will range from 650 to about 685 square feet in size. Since the Planning Commission hearing on September 7th, the project applicant has updated the project plans to show compliance with one of the Planning Commission conditions, which was condition 13. That was part of the September 7th approval. This condition requires removal of the spa and associated retaining wall along Harbor Street. This is what the plans look like. The image that you see is what it looked like at the September 7th meeting. And then here is the revised project plans that are included in the council staff report as an attachment. The condition required removal of that retaining wall and spa. And in placing the condition, the PC found that the height of the retaining wall, as proposed, would have been too massive in order to maintain the natural bluff setting and character, as the project is subject to bluff development standards. So the revised plans that you see here reduces the exposed retaining wall height from 9 feet to about 5.2 feet at that southwest corner. And if you can see my cursor here, this is the point that I'm referring to. The next several slides summarize the appeal points by the appellant, Ms. Betty Winholtz, and each of these appeal points is followed by a staff response. The first point is in regards to major vegetation removal. The appellant claims that the project was revised from the March meeting to the September 7th meeting, where in March the trees were originally proposed to remain. The appellant is requesting that the trees remain, and this is referring to the trees at the southwest corner of Market and Harbor, and that they remain in order to soften the building design and that the project be in compliance with the Urban Forest Management Plan. In this regard, the Planning Commission specifically addressed the design of this corner at Harbor and Market, including commentary on the trees. And first, let me point out that at the time of the March meeting, there was no planning application that had yet been filed with the city. The plans presented at that time were only conceptual in nature. The purpose of the March meeting as a conceptual review meeting was only to seek early PC input and feedback in advance of an actual application. Planning Commission felt when they looked at this in March, the conceptual, that the existing trees that were originally proposed to remain would hide the architecture, and requested that upon submittal of an application that the applicant submit a fully developed landscape plan in lieu of keeping the trees, and they requested to modify the elevation by providing more building articulation and adding windows to emphasize the lobby. It really noted that this is an urban corner here at the corner, and really wanted to see some engagement with the street. The Urban Forest Management Plan, as the appellant describes it, does not apply to the project, as the quoted section in her appeal refers to the method of protecting existing trees during construction. The applicant's project does comply with the city's major vegetation guidelines for tree replacement, and that is shown on the plans. In the second claim, the appellant states that the project is not subordinate to the bluff setting. References that the height of structures has changed since the March meeting, and that it is out of character for the area. In addition, the appellant states that the visual simulations submitted incorrectly make the height appear to have less impact. The appellant is requesting that the height be lowered to the height as shown in the March meeting. Pardon me. On this point, the Planning Commission carefully reviewed the design and character of the bluff setting. Planning Commission liked the design, and they noted that the proposed density as only 6 units really suits the bluff top site with the staggered structures. Planning Commission, again, emphasized the importance of this corner and really noting that the public views open up with the staggered structures as they step up the slope. They requested visual simulations from multiple points to evaluate the context of the neighborhood and proposed location. And to underscore this point, that is the Planning Condition 13, which requires removal of the spa and retaining wall to really emphasize the findings with the bluff development standards. In regards to the height, the Planning Commission, the plans submitted in March, again, were only conceptual at this point, and the full engineering had not been done. Staff would point out that only a portion of the project is proposed at 30 feet, which is the building that's located at the corner of Harbor and Market, with the parking lot adjacent. The project, as approved, complies with the bluff development standards and height requirements. And these next several slides that I can show you depict the visual simulations that the Planning Commission reviewed. And so here's the existing view from Harbor Street and Market Avenue, and then the proposed view. In this image here, you see the addition of the vertical window along the east elevation, and then the change to the trees. This is an existing view from Market Avenue that shows the existing structures on site and the trees that are proposed as major vegetation removal. And then opening up here in this corner, some views, adding engagement to the street with the hotel lobby window. The third claim by the appellant relates to parking. On this point, the appellant states that EV parking was not required and that the project is actually a short-term vacation rental project, noting that the 7 parking spaces are insufficient. The appellant is requesting that EV be required and the applicant provide additional parking. Building division staff confirmed that the Green Building Code does not require EV parking for a development of this size. It's too small to trigger it. The project was approved as a hotel by PC and does include a guest lobby, and as such meets the parking requirements. hotels are not required to have a manager's unit. On claim 4, the appellant states that the September staff report did not identify the change to the retaining wall and requests the applicant to abide by the PC's condition to eliminate the retaining wall. And the plans have been updated and do show compliance with Planning Commission Condition 13. The appellant's last claim has to do with low-cost visitor accommodations. The appellant's claim is that the large room sizes affirm that this is not a low-income visitor serving project, and that the 2017 memo on low-cost accommodations does not include the upscale projects to be built and is insufficient to satisfy the Coastal Act. The appellant is requesting that one unit be made affordable. Staff's response is that the low-cost memo referred to is a technical memo that was prepared in 2017, which informed policy development for Plan Morro Bay, which is the city's recently adopted and certified general plan coastal land use plan. The memo's analysis concluded that the city has an adequate supply of low-cost accommodations, and this was also reviewed with Coastal Commission staff. Requiring an on-site unit at this project does not apply because the property is not on the Embarcadero and does not displace existing units. A full policy to implement the land use plan, or LUP, will be developed with the city's draft zoning code, which is in progress. However, after consulting with coastal staff on this particular project, a specific analysis was done and is included in the staff report, and it was performed for this project on whether mitigation would be required by surveying neighboring hotels and amenities. And the conclusion was that although room rates are high, the hotel could be characterized as a moderate cost accommodation option based on the extensive amenities and value offered, as well as location. And this is consistent with LUP policy 6.2, which encourages a range of accommodations. So on this next slide, it shows the details on the local survey results of the hotels. That included both January and room rates for a typical family of 4. It also included the offered amenities of each hotel, and the applicant has submitted hotel proposed rates to vary between $250 to $600 a night, depending on room location and then peak versus non-peak season. The project has been designed to accommodate lower cost alternatives, such as in-room kitchen, guest laundry, barbecue area, outdoor fire pit, game lawn, a common view courtyard, and bicycles for guest use. That plus proximity to the downtown and waterfront areas, plus the size of the rooms, presents a value as a moderate cost accommodation option for families and visitors, and thus the determination is that no mitigation is needed, nor is there a requirement to provide one of the 6 units as affordable. Planning Commission's review, deliberation, and resulting approval of the coastal development permit and conditional use permit found the project to be consistent with the city's general plan, coastal land use plan, and zoning code. Staff's recommendation, therefore, is to adopt a resolution 7521, which would deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission approval for the project at 205 Harbor Street. And with that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate the excellent presentation, and especially the helpful visualizations or simulations that you included with the packet. With that, I'll go ahead and open this up to any council questions of Cindy. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. And I see Councilmember Heller, sir. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Cindy, excellent presentation. I agree with what the mayor said. The visual simulations are very, very helpful. I noticed we got a letter from a community member asking about story poles. And story poles, for people who don't know what they are poles that are put up before development is actually built so that neighbors could see the height of the roof, if I understand that correctly. Is that something the city does or ever does, or what are your thoughts, or is there a policy about that?
Sure, yes. There is no policy and there's no requirement that it be done on every project. Typically, we find that the modern day equipment equivalent of doing story polls. It used to be very common 10 to 20 years ago. Now we have better ways of evaluating visual impacts through the 3D visual simulations, as I showed in my presentation. I will tell you, I've been here for almost 12 years, and only once have I seen story polls put up on a project. And that was a hotel project near the high school where they were requesting a height exception. On this one, the Planning Commission did carefully discuss neighborhood compatibility and really wanting to know what it was going to look like. And I would just point out as well, the hotels where the hotel building that would be at 30 feet would just be at the southeast corner of the property.
Okay, thank you for that. And then, so how does the city determine after something is built if it's within the height limit?
So we require a building height certificate. We actually require it at two stages, both at the forms when they're doing the foundation, and then as well as prior to roof nail framing. So we're looking at it when they're putting in the forms, and they also do a setback certification so that, before they're putting up walls, we can see will they be compliant with the height, and that kind of helps us identify if there's going to be any issues because it's right at the beginning of the construction. And then they certify that one, prior to the roof nail framing or at the end of the framing stage.
Okay, thanks again, Cindy. Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Hiller. And Councilmember Ford, please.
At this time, can I move that we, can I make a motion?
No, not yet. We have to wait for the public hearing to be closed.
Okay.
Sorry. Thanks.
No, that's okay. I'm still learning the ropes.
All righty. Councilmember Addis, please.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate the excitement around this project. I do want to disclose that I did a site walk with Kathy Novak and met a resident that lives near here who was asking, or a resident's friend who was asking about story poles. And I suggested that person either join the meeting this evening or write to council to ask about the story poles. And so my question is, if the story poles aren't there, but there are visualizations, where would the person who's asking about them go to find the visualizations around the height in lieu of the story poles? Like, what's the website specifically? How can we get this person information so that it's easy for them? I assume they're asking for story poles because it is just easy.
Right. Yeah, sure. So I can answer that. There's a couple of ways. One, they can come into city offices, and staff's always available to go through the plans. The visual simulations were included as a page in the plan set. So one, they can come in to staff. We're also available by phone, and we can email. Certainly we can, Zoom if they're not comfortable doing in-person meetings. And then they are also available as an attachment to the staff report too. Yes.
Thank you. That's it from me, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barton, please.
Cindy, I'm late to the party. Everybody has told you how much they appreciated the quality of your presentation. And I just wanted to say that same thing. The visualizations were really, really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barton. And Cindy, I had the same question about story polls. I did talk to the gentleman who called me today, and thank you for answering that. I'm satisfied that the simulations will meet that need, and thanks to Councilmember Addis for having you disclose where that can be found. I appreciate that. So with that, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing and ask if we can bring in Ms. Winholtz. And Betty, are you with us here?
Thank you, Mayor. I have unmuted Betty. She is unmuted.
Welcome, Betty. You hear me okay, Betty?
She just dropped. Let me see what happened here. Please stand by.
Can you hear me? I'm here.
Got you now, Betty. Yes.
So I would like to respond to some of the staff's comments regarding my 5 points.
Yes, please.
So Regarding the major public vegetation removal, we have an urban forest management plan, and it's for the downtown area more than the residential area. And I'm not sure how you can distinguish that a development is not construction, and how this would not apply to that's construction development. That's for me a synonym, and so I'm not sure how that works and doesn't address this issue of protecting the public trees that are currently there, because they should not be building out in the public right-of-way. And so that's my first response to the major vegetation policy comment. Regarding being subordinate to the setting, when you looked at the simulation with the Blue Sail Inn that is across the street, that is an example of a hotel who has stepped down the bluff and is also two-story, but does not stick up in the air as this proposal does. And I'm not sure what instigates moving from 24 to 27 feet up to 30 feet, because it's all roof and it just becomes steeper. And so I'm not sure of the necessity for expanding that height. It just seems a little extra. I'm not talking about design. It still keeps its architectural look. It just lowers that and helps out the hotel behind it to some extent. Also, with regard to the comment about story poles, I always feel that they're much more effective than simulations. Simulations can be manipulated, whether purposely or not purposely, and not that this was happened here, but story poles don't. They're like, for real. You can't manipulate them. They're in the ground. You can see the height. And it's a good suggestion by the neighbor or the friend of the neighbor to do that so the community can see what we're getting in such an exposed area, because this is a place where everybody walks down and up from the Embarcadero. Both tourists and locals will be seeing it. My concern about the parking is that I feel like they're using the term motel to get away with not providing sufficient parking, because it was declared in the initial meeting that these were vacation rentals. It's very similar to the Salty Sister down on the Embarcadero, where they're self-sufficient units. The sizes are 600 plus square feet, which is not the size of a hotel room necessarily, and having the amenities of separate rooms and or beds or kitchens and all those things that you would find in a vacation rental does not, by any other name, is still a vacation rental, even if you try to call it a hotel room. And you can see by that table that Gray's Inn, which has been here for decades and decades, and the Salty Sister are the two that are actually comparable to this project, not the other hotels, because they provide that full service of kitchens and other amenities that you would find with a little living room as opposed to regular hotel rooms on the other examples that were given. And they do charge more. And so this is a very expensive place for people to go and stay. It does not address low income visitor serving at all. And we already have very expensive places. The two that we just named, Gray's Inn, Salty Sister, Inn at Morro Bay, the new motel that's coming online over at the high school. So I don't think there's any, and plus all the boutique little places along the west side of the Embarcadero. And so we have plenty of expensive places coming online, but not moderate or low income. So to have one room out of the 6 that is dedicated to that, I think is in line with at least our verbal agreement that we need to address that. Whether we actually do that or not is up to you, because this is your discretion to require people to provide for all kinds of incomes here. The retaining wall is not an issue. And so I was just putting that in there to point out to you that this was a surprise that came up during the Planning Commission meeting, and fortunately was seen and removed because it was quite a visual impact to that corner and its height. So I am asking that you follow the urban forest management plan. I am asking you that you lower the roof by about 3 feet. I am asking that you look at the parking area and how you're going to impact Pelican Place and how you will protect that neighborhood, and to make one of the 6 units affordable. I think that covers most everything that we've talked about.
Thank you, Betty. And who will be speaking for the applicant? Is it going to be Ms. Novak or Mr. Xiao? Or do they want to speak?
I can try to unmute Kathy Novak, which I've done.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Heading, and council members. My name is Kathy Novak, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant for the Harbor Street project. Before I begin, I'd like to thank both staff and the Planning Commission for their outstanding job in evaluating this project and making recommendations that truly fit within the city guidelines and character. We believe that the recommendation to deny the appeal and uphold the Commission's approval of this project is warranted. There's a detailed staff report with responses to the applicant's grounds for appeal, so I really don't have much to add and will offer just a few comments. First, the applicant took the Planning Commission's original comments from the conceptual review meeting and made several modifications to address the concerns and recommendations prior to a formal submittal to the city. These modifications were then presented to the Commission during a regularly scheduled hearing in September. The Commission had additional comments and requested changes, such as removing the retaining wall along Harbor Street, but in the end, both the Commission and the applicant were supportive of this project as approved. In conclusion, I would just like to say this project meets or exceeds all the city standards without any exceptions and meets all the policies and plans. It is a low-impact development that will serve as a nice transition from the downtown to the waterfront and provides a nice visual corridor with the separated buildings. All in all, this is a wonderful visitor-serving commercial opportunity for the community, and we certainly hope the council will deny the appeal and approve the project as presented tonight. I'll conclude my presentation and just ask you if you have any questions, and I also have the project architect on if you have any technical questions that you need to ask him. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kathy. With that, I'll go ahead and open up general public comment. This is public comment for any member of the public that would like to speak on this item, B-1. Public comment is now open. Anthony, do we have any speakers?
Thank you, Mayor Heading. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue. Okay,
I'm going to close public comment. And I will also close the public hearing. Thanks to staff again for, as been stated a number of times, an excellent staff report with some excellent simulations that were very helpful to me personally, and also to both the appellant and the applicant for being here this evening and making their presentations. So now, Councilmember Ford, this would be the time if you are inclined to either have discussion or make a motion, this would be the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I do have a question.
Certainly.
Is it an appropriate time for that?
No, certainly. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so my question is, do I need to disclose the fact that I was on the Planning Commission that approved this project to begin with? Does that need to be, is that something that needs to be disclosed, and does that affect any?
Chris, does that, let me ask our city attorney.
So Councilmember Ford did just say that she was on Planning Commission. Out of an abundance of caution, she might choose to not sit on the board right now, the appeal board. That'd probably be the prudent thing to do, given that she was initially before Planning Commission. On the other hand, if the records were the same and the evidence is the same, then it's likely okay, but out of an abundance of caution, it might be better to not actually engage in the discussion and vote on the appeal.
So, Jen, it's your choice.
I will take our attorney's advice and I will not comment any further, and I will abstain from voting, recuse myself.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for your disclosure on that. And I had forgotten you possibly had been on the Planning Commission during the initial presentation. So thanks for reminding us for that. I'll make a comment. I appreciate the appellant's challenge of the issues. In watching the Planning Commission review of this, I'm so impressed with our Planning Commission and the way that they evaluated all of the issues that were brought up, and even considered some historical value-related issues and addressed issues such as the landscape management plan, etc. And I appreciate staff addressing all of the issues that were raised, indicating that there is substantial compliance with regard to any city ordinances or city requirements regarding the appropriateness of this project and the approval and recommendation by the Planning Commission. Because of that, I am going to move that we adopt resolution number 75-21, making the necessary findings to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission approval of CDP 21-019 and conditional use permit number CUP 2-05 at the site 205 Harbor Street to allow construction of a new 6-room, 5,042-foot hotel on a 0.4-acre lot, including the merger of 6 underlying lots located on Harbor Street between Market and Front Streets, and removal of major vegetation, and 7 on-site parking spaces. A lot of words. Is there a second? Councilmember Barton.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, thank you. A motion by Mayor Henning for the staff recommendation, second by Councilmember Barton. And any discussion or comments? Councilmember Hiller, yes, sir.
Yes, I am concerned about the vacation rental issue. It does appear that it is going to be used in that way. On the other hand, I have a lot of confidence in what our staff has done, and particularly, as you mentioned, Mayor, with our Planning Commission. As liaison, council liaison of the Planning Commission, I have a lot of confidence in that group. They did a very, very thorough study, and I'm convinced that this project complies with all city standards. I am concerned about its height. I am concerned about parking impact, because it does clearly seem to be used, potentially used as vacation rentals. But having said that, I support the project.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Appreciate that. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Henning?
Yes.
Motion carries 401.
Good. Thank you again. Thank you again, Cindy, for your presentation and for the great staff work. And thank you, as Councilmember Heller said, thank you again to our Planning Commission for your great work. That brings us to item B-2. This is our second public hearing of the evening. This is adoption of resolution number 7621, approving a major amendment, number MAJ 20-004, located at 715 Embarcadero, for the conversion of commercial fishing wharf to harbor walk, coastal public access, conversion of existing interior 470 square foot fish processing area to a new retail space, removal of a 580 square foot outdoor covered patio and conversion of the area to a new harbor walk, repair of 3 existing pilings to remain for support of the new harbor walk. This project also proposes a new 461 square foot street-facing public outdoor dining and related commercial facade improvements. The project is located in the WFPD S.4 zoning district and is within the Coastal Commission original jurisdiction. So with that, this is item B2. Again, this will be a public hearing. We'll start with our staff presentation, move to council questions and answers. After that, I'll open up the public hearing, ask the applicant to make a statement if they wish, followed by general public comment. After that, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to council for discussion and or action. Cindy, you're up again. Welcome.
Thank you. I will share my screen here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so as stated, this is a request for a conditional use permit major modification of the concept precise plan approval for the city lease site at 715 Embarcadero. And on the screen before you is the location of the city lease site, an aerial image, and it is the current location of the Dolphin Shirt Company. The project description for this project is primarily coastal public access improvements. It would create a linkage of harbor walk access where none currently exists. The project includes 4 main components as summarized on the screen. The first is to demolish the portion of the commercial fishing wharf that is there, removal of 5 wood pilings. Second, install a new 10-foot harbor walk and an additional 10-foot wide fiberglass deck, repair existing pilings, and in addition, remove the 580 square foot outdoor covered patio and windscreen area. Third, it would make interior changes, including conversion of the existing interior fish processing area to provide for a second retail space within the existing building. And then lastly, create a new permanent street-facing public outdoor dining area that is 461 square feet. On the right side of the image that you see is a visual simulation that at the bottom of the picture, or bottom of this slide, is what it currently looks there, that existing facade. And of course, as you see, there is no harbor walk access there on that west side of the building. The project, as proposed, would provide a very nice connection of harbor walk access. So as required by the Plan Development Overlay Zone, on October 5th, the Planning Commission forwarded a favorable recommendation for City Council for approval of the CUP modification. The PC's recommendation includes 7 added conditions that are described in the staff report. These include conditions regarding the street-facing plaza, public dining tables, building design, and preservation of the wharf. The images that you see here on the screen are images that were presented to the Planning Commission. At the top is what the east side elevation of the proposed building would look like. The public tables that would be provided are shown in the bottom images. So these are tables of how the lease site looked during 2020 when we had the temporary outdoor dining permit. So that gives an image of the proposed tables. And then this image here shows the 4 approved tables that Planning Commission approved at their October meeting. Conditions 15, 17, 18, and 19 in your council resolution address the street-facing plaza and public seating area. These conditions were added by Planning Commission in order to ensure that the plaza remained open and easily accessible by the public. Planning Commission discussed this in detail, making sure that it would not lend itself to have any private appearance, that it was a private business that was operating this, and that any clutter or excessive tables, that the plaza be open to the public. Conditions 16, 20, and 22 address the building. These conditions were added by PC to require added window area for the rear retail space, and then revised lighting to be appropriate for the harbor walk area, and include slope profile details on the building plans to ensure that there was connectivity between the Dutchman lease site, or excuse me, the Dolphin Shirt Company lease site, and then the Roses Landing lease site to the north. Planning Commission also discussed these conditions in detail because noting that the harbor walk access would be wider than what is minimally required in this area. Really wanted to make sure that this had a public face and that this was a, very apparent as a public access space and really kind of giving it a sense of place. And then conditions 21 and 23 address preservation of the wharf. And this was also discussed in detail by the Planning Commission. That included discussing the potential for preservation of the existing commercial fishing wharf. Ultimately, it was deemed infeasible due to the space constraints that would be needed while simultaneously providing for that required coastal public access where 10 feet is the minimum harbor walk requirement. The conditions added by Planning Commission preserve the wharf planking and edge curbs, and then they also require the applicant work with staff on pursuing off-site preservation opportunities for the hoist. This slide depicts the proposed site plan and revised elevations that I was describing. In the image on the left, the area shaded in orange is where this new Harbor Walk connection would be located. And it's that area in the earlier picture you saw where it is where there is that current gap. And then the new retail space would be located on the west side of the building as outlined in orange. On the right side of the screen are the proposed elevations. The extension of the Harbor Walk access on this lease site really would be a significant new addition to the city's Harbor Walk system by filling an existing gap in our network access. It furthers the goals of the city's waterfront master plan and the downtown waterfront strategic plan. It also, as I stated, exceeds the minimum requirements by expanding the width 20 feet and also provides a nice street-facing public dining option for increased public enjoyment of the bay by both residents and visitors. The project is consistent with the general plan and LCP and all zoning requirements. No height increase is proposed on the single-story development, nor are any exceptions requested for this project. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council conditionally approve the project as a combined concept precise plan approval by adopting Resolution 7621, which includes the findings and conditions of approval for the project at 715 Embarcadero. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cindy. Again, excellent presentation and very comprehensive. Appreciate all of the visuals as well. With that, I'll just go ahead and open it up. Any council questions of Cindy? Seeing no hands raised. Okay. I will go ahead and open up the public hearing. Public hearing is now open, and I'll invite the applicant, either Mr. Van Beerden or Ms. Novak, as the representative. Not sure who's going to speak, but let's go ahead and promote them in. And
good evening again, Mayor Heading and council members.
Welcome.
Good evening once again. My name is Kathy Novak, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant for the 715 Embarcadero project. I'd like to thank staff and the Planning Commission for their help, insightful comments, and recommendation for approval of this project. Staff has covered the major points both verbally and in writing, so I will be brief with my comments. The one important note that I would like to mention is that the applicants have approximately 12 years remaining on their lease, but they are willing to construct this project now, which will offer a significant benefit by installing a missing link of the Harbor Walk several years before a new lease would require the capital improvements to be done. The Planning Commission spent considerable time reviewing our comments as well as the public input on this project. We believe that a reasonable solution was formed after their deliberations, and we have a project that will meet the design goals of the city's downtown waterfront strategic plan, other standards, and provides a pleasant and festive atmosphere to draw pedestrians from the Embarcadero. To summarize the major features of this proposed project, they include the following: a new Harbor Walk connection where none exists currently, a 20-foot wide Harbor Walk, a public plaza with public seating, retention of half the existing wood wharf and converting to a public deck, converting an existing outdoor patio to a public seating on the west side, reuse of the old fish processing space to retail, and fresh paint and exterior building upgrades. These are all important components that create a vibrant waterfront and visitor serving area. The applicants believe that this project is all about new public benefits for the greater good and will be a real asset to the waterfront. So on behalf of the Van Beerdens, I would like to respectfully ask for the council's approval of this project as presented tonight. This concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate that very much. With that, I'll go ahead and open up general public comment. This is public comment for this evening's agenda item B-2. Any member of the public wishing to speak to this item? Public comment is now open. And Anthony, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Heading. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I'll go ahead and close public comment. I will close the public hearing and I will bring it back to council for either discussion or action. Councilmember Heller, I see your hand, sir.
Thank you. I must say this is my compliment to Cindy and the Planning Commission night. This is another really great project that you've headed up here, Cindy. And the Planning Commission was so thoughtful in the way they addressed the issues and little additions that they made. It's really an exciting project, and you've just done a great job. And my hat's off to the Planning Commission. Saving some of the original wharf boards is a really smart touch that never occurred to me. I thought this is a great idea. Adding glazing on the west-facing side, doing something a little bit different with the doors. Those little small things that come from this Planning Commission are what makes a difference between an average building and a really excellent building that fits in with our harbor and also the history of the harbor. So I just want to say I'm really happy with this project, and I'd like to move approval when the time comes.
The time is now, Councilmember Heller. After that eloquent speech, if you're inclined to make a motion, go ahead, sir.
Oh, well, I move approval of item B2, excuse me.
Okay. Motion by Councilmember Heller to approve item B2 according to staff recommendation. Second by Councilmember Addis. Any further comments? Well, I will chime in and just echo what you said, Councilmember Heller. This is a great, significant public improvement. I want to thank Mr. Van Beerden for aggressively going after this with 12 years, just 12 years remaining on his lease. I think that speaks very highly of his commitment to our city. These tremendously new public amenities and improvements are quite impressive. And I really appreciate leaseholders taking that on with the uncertainty of potentially what might happen in the future. The new Harbor Walk connector is unbelievably fantastic. It extends to 20 feet. The public plaza as outlined and public deck, I think will provide even greater access to our beautiful bay for our visitors that are coming into our community. And as Councilmember Heller said, the facade improvements are outstanding. And again, I'm going to echo what you said, Jeff. Great Planning Commission. Very much appreciate all of the conditions that they outlined for the project, and I want to thank each and every one of them, and also thank Cindy again for an excellent presentation, very clear, concise, and very helpful. So those are my comments, and I see Councilmember Addis, please. Yes.
I should disclose that I did a site walk with Kathy Novak, and it was very informative, and want to echo the compliments to Cindy as well as to the Planning Commission as well as to the applicant. I think, excuse me, I think it's going to be a benefit to Morro Bay.
Great, thanks. And Councilmember Ford, please.
I'd also like to disclose that this came across our agenda when my last meeting, but it was pulled at the last minute, so I didn't get to actually, participate in that process. But I did, however, have the pleasure of watching the next two meetings that did address this project, and I as well am impressed with the interaction between Planning Commission and the owner of the property, and Cindy's help, Novak's help with this as well. But and I think that Cindy, your presentation on this was absolutely amazing, and I appreciate all the visuals again. It's really helpful when we're looking through these projects and we can see visually, and then also, it just really helps us to understand the project. And you guys have all been, our city staff is just so accessible and helpful when we have questions, and I really do appreciate that. So I love the project, and I'm proud of all of us. So great job, everyone.
Well stated. Thank you, Councilmember Ford. Glad you're able to vote on this one.
Me too.
If there are no other comments, I'll go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you. That concludes our public hearings for this evening. I'll begin now with our business items. This is item C-1. This is the review of the Morro Bay Public Parking Management Study conducted by Walker Consultants and the consideration for recommended next steps regarding parking management. And this has been a long time coming. No disrespect to you, Mr. Collins. This started well before your tenure, and we're glad to see that coming forward this evening. With that, I will turn it over to you first, perhaps to introduce our consultant.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor and council members. I will do a brief introduction of the item and then bring on Stefan from Walker Consultants to present the findings and recommendations to council. But before you is a recommendation to review said parking management study conducted by Walker Consultants, so the Morro Bay waterfront, Laurel Rock, and downtown parking areas, and authorize staff to take initial steps to develop a plan to implement parking management recommendations, including development of a pilot paid parking program in the most impacted areas of the Embarcadero, and bring this back for council review at a later date. It's further recommended that council direct staff to continue to seek input from key waterfront parking users and engage with the California Coastal Commission staff in developing this pilot program. We're getting into fiscal impacts later on, but just by way of background, as the mayor stated, we've been talking about parking for a while. We know there's been at least some perceived issues in the waterfront just based upon increased tourism and visitation. Council had made this a priority action item back in 2017. Given staffing and resource constraints, we hadn't been able to pull the trigger on a study, but took it upon myself to help lead that in 2020, and we brought on Walker Consultants that time, and they assessed the Embarcadero, Morro Rock, and downtown parking areas, both on season and off season, again, to really understand what the conditions are and see if there is a need for changes to be made. So with that, I would like to bring forward Stefan Turoff of Walker Consultants, who's a principal with the firm there and done lots of these studies on the coast and in San Luis Obispo County itself. So without further ado, I will ask that he be promoted to panelist. I believe he has been. Is that correct? Let's see here. Oh, there he is. All right. And then I will share my screen. And so, Stefan, you can just kind of direct me once I get this up, if I can do this correctly. You can just direct me to move the slides forward.
Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It looks like we're ready to go. Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, citizens, everyone here today, city staff. Like City Manager Scott Collins said, my name is Stefan Turoff. I am a Principal and Director of Planning for Walker for the state of California. We are nationwide, but I have the good fortune of heading up our planning operation here. A big part, we're a 55-year-old firm. Traditionally, a lot of engineers designing garages, but we found, especially in California, parking and getting parking right is a lot about planning. And as Scott mentioned, we've done a number of planning studies, Pismo Beach, San Luis Obispo, from Healdsburg, Carpinteria. We're working with them. because a lot of the parking gets into not about adding spaces, but how to manage what you have. And that's really, the questions and what we found here today. So with that, next slide, please. Thank you. So we'll talk about, where we collected data, what we were studying. When I first spoke with the city manager, he talked about concerns about parking availability along the Embarcadero, but also in downtown Morro Bay. So we looked at those, and of course, by the rock and the data we collected and when. That really establishes our understanding of existing conditions. And then based on what we saw out there and what we quantified, we provided some recommendations. Next slide, please. So the study areas, really 3 of them. The Embarcadero, as you can see, all the way up and down the Embarcadero, roughly from the stacks down to Tidelands Park, is the area that we studied. That narrow band in some respects, and you have that barrier with the bluffs there. Then we also looked at downtown as a core area, and the Morro Rock parking areas that you see on the left. When we counted, we looked at the on-street parking, off-street parking, public and private, with the exception of hotels, and basically any sizable amount of parking, 20 spaces or more. Typically, we see parking filling up in just about any city, first on the street, then in the public lots. And we know in your case, you have a lot of lots that fill, in some cases fill first, up towards the northern side of the Embarcadero. And then private parking tends to fill last. But in this case, well, we'll see. The area of concern was really the public's access to parking, and was there an issue and what to do about that. Next slide, please. So when we collected, so many cities, coastal cities, especially in California, summer and the off season are different animals. So we really wanted to see what's going on during a busy summer period, and then during the off season, a shoulder season. So November, not, a February rainy period, and hopefully we have more rainy periods, but just get a sense of that sort of middle shoulder season. And like I said, a number of cities we work with, they're busy on the weekends, even in the summer, but the weekdays are not that busy. In your case, you were pretty busy during the weekdays, especially during that summer period, that is. So on street, we collected data every 2 hours from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then off street, because off-street cars tend to move less from noon, 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. And then we quantified a sample of cars turning over in your busiest spaces to see were cars turning and get a sense of who is parking there. And turnover is something of a proxy for access. Once you have cars not turning over in a busy place, it means people are not finding spaces. And it's really a question, cars turning over, in some respects, it's like restaurant tables turning over. It allows for throughput. It allows the people standing by the door to eventually get that table, or in this case, to eventually find a place to park and come down and enjoy the Embarcadero or the rest of the city. So next slide, please. So let's take a look at the existing conditions. Number of spaces, you have about 1,100 in total along the Embarcadero, split between off-street and on-street. And some of your lots are so narrow, especially up, towards the stacks, it's hard to distinguish, but about 400 on-street spaces and about 750 off-street. That's typical, more off-street spaces than on-street, but downtown it was the reverse because the lots are smaller there, but about 450 spaces downtown. And then the spaces serving Morro Rock, which we included a few of the lots off Coleman. I think once you move away from the Embarcadero, that was about 400 spaces. So quite a few, actually, given the smaller area. So summertime, the heat map really tells a story. You see that red band, there going from the stacks downward. We're saying that's, more than 85% full, and more than 85% full means less than one space available per block, or what you traditionally call the length of street that's called a block. So once we see that red, we're saying somebody driving up the street is having trouble finding an empty parking space. And we say all you need is one per block for each driver who's coming by. So we don't want spaces to be too empty. but we don't want them to be too full because, among other things, cars start circulating, and most of all, they just can't find a place. An interesting thing to note, I think, is all of us, sort of human nature, even if a place is very busy, maybe up at the front of the supermarket or down along the Embarcadero, we may have trouble finding a space, but we say, I remember that one time I did, and people go down looking for the space, rolling the dice, crossing their fingers, and then maybe they drive out and go to that area that's a little farther out when they can't find a space. So I think most of us know, and I go to Morro Bay with my family. We love it. We tend to avoid going down the Embarcadero if it's too crowded, or at least driving down there. But this is what I'm talking about, that all this red indicates an issue. And this is summer weekday. So weekday, the Embarcadero is 67% utilized. And again, that doesn't sound that high, but in some places, as you can see, the red, it's much higher. It's well north of 85%. And then what brings that down is the emptier space is much towards the south. Downtown, we wanted to study it. A few blocks are impacted here and there, but not really an issue. There is, if there's not parking on the street downtown, there's parking around the corner. Next slide, please. So I got a little ahead of myself. Your weekday is actually pretty full. 67%, most cities we study that identify as having a parking problem, overall, they're 67%, and that usually occurs on the weekend. In your case, that was on a weekday. Weekend, we see 86%. That's a very high number, and we see all the way from the northern end to the southern end of our study area. Most highly utilized areas, basically all public and private parking along the Embarcadero during a busy summer weekend. I'm sure no surprise to most of you, but part of our task here was to really quantify, apply numbers to what people perceived, and it appears rightfully. Interesting, and I think there are a few reasons for this, but the one area along the Embarcadero, that unpaved lot south of the stacks, do people not realize it's for parking? Do people say, well, it's unpaved, they're not going to drive in there? But that was a little, available space there, uncharacteristically of the whole area. Downtown, 72%, much fuller, but not that full. Again, you go around the corner when you're downtown, you can find a space. So not so problematic. Block by block, not ideal, but not so problematic. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. Off season, as I mentioned, in November. So, the last time I was in Morro Bay, it was right before Christmas, before COVID. Unfortunately, I hope to go back. But, it wasn't that busy. And here we see a few places are busy, but not super busy. You can find a space in basically every block during the peak weekday, that is weekday. So a lot more availability than we saw summertime weekday. The core area, Beach to Marine Street, is busiest. And that's what we saw in summer. In summer, it was much busier. Here, though, it's still one of the busiest times. Downtown, there's really no issues. A few spaces you see fill up. Who's parking there? Is that customers? Is it employees? Not sure, but, again, around the corner, you'll find a space downtown. Next slide. Let's see. Weekend. Now, this was interesting. November weekend. We're talking about later into November. This was not Thanksgiving yet, but things get pretty busy. Lunchtime, you see that, whether it's regional or who's coming in, people are coming in to the Embarcadero. And, if you drive down, Marina Street or you might find yourself going block after block after block, not finding parking. And this is an issue, and this is an issue even for, a November weekend. So this is pretty busy, busier than we expected to find. Again, Beach and Marina Street, that's busy. Those lots to the north are busy. Downtown, not a problem. Thank you. Now the Rock. Summertime, weekday, you see availability basically all over there. And we know there's that, several hundred space lot right up against the Rock. The weekend got very busy. Those lots coming off Coleman, and then even the Rock itself, we have between 70 and 84%. I don't have that number right here, but we have a few photos. That still gets quite busy. And if we break that up, where did we find gets busiest first? If you park in a space and have a view of the beach, or more likely a view of the bay, those spaces all filled up. what accounts for the available spaces, sort of interior, where you park, sitting in your car, you don't have much of a view, but that's the people, you get out of your car and you walk over to the rock. So there's a little difference within those numbers, but 89% of all those spaces on a weekend in summer, that's quite busy. Next slide, please. So off season, again, the rock, plenty of availability on a weekday, but weekend, some of those little lots leading up to the rock. Oh, and you see that. We did identify a little separate area looking at the bay that fills up. So the rock parking does get pretty busy. And we look at this in terms of congestion and availability. And it may be a little easier to find parking around the rock, but we understand, talking to city staff, that, the congestion really comes on that roadway. We say parking is, the transportation system with cars, it's vehicles, right of way, the roadway, and terminal capacity, the parking. If you have problems with one, you tend to have problems moving, through that whole system. And that's what we see there. Next slide, please. So how long do people park? Again, this becomes an issue where parking is full and the spaces aren't turning over. So it's true, I've been digging through this data, even after the report, the majority of cars did park for 1 to 2 hours, and that's great. That's what you want. But we did sample about 100 spaces right along the Embarcadero. This says about 50, it's about 50%. But we're parked for 3 hours or more, some well over 3 hours. Meaning that when you're driving down the street, there's a good chance that half the spaces that you're passing that are full are due to cars, potentially, employees, potentially somebody who parks and then maybe walks around for the day. But they're not moving, and they're taking the place of a car that could park and maybe wants to go to, a restaurant or a business for just an hour. That turnover is very important, because when we look at capacity, parking capacity is not just a function of how many spaces, but how often, to what extent they're turning over. So I would say this is an issue here. Time limits are there to turn spaces. I want to emphasize, time limits, and we'll talk about, a fee for parking. They're not meant to force somebody out of a parking space. They're meant so that somebody staying a long time doesn't park there to begin with, and somebody staying a short time says, I can deal with the time limit, or I can deal with, paying for parking for an hour. So the turnover is crucial. It's not just about how many spaces, but how they're being managed and their throughput, essentially. Next slide, please. So key findings, again, not such a surprise. Some are significantly busier, but even on your off-season weekends, pretty busy. Lunchtime was the busiest. Again, not a surprise. And we have to say, there are long periods of time there that it's not busy. But when you really get, a lot of people coming to Morro Bay and the Embarcadero specifically, are they having trouble finding parking? And the answer appears to be yes, they are, due to full spaces and many spaces not turning over. So the Embarcadero, I think at this point we've said it's always good to enforce your time limits for some turnover. You're not trying to get citations. You just want people to know these spaces are for customers. But there's not an availability problem downtown. There is along the Embarcadero at the busiest times. Between Beach and Marina, as I mentioned, some of those lots heading up towards the stacks. Most people park for 1 to 2 hours, but a significant number of spaces were full and not turning over for hours and hours. And Morro Rock really is very seasonal, even more than the Embarcadero during summer weekends. Next slide, please. So what do we do given this? You have for example, downtown, you have some parking time limits. Again, the purpose is to turn spaces. The problem with time limits, very often, one is it's free parking for an hour or two, but it's paid parking once somebody, crosses that threshold, and it's pretty unpleasant. It's a pretty blunt instrument, and it's not very flexible. But nonetheless, we know a lot of communities prefer time limits, and we'd say, you need to encourage turnover somehow. So we do recommend time limits. Maybe 3 hours, it's a long time, but is the right length of time there in Embarcadero, but something. But really, a paid parking program in terms of enforcing, in terms of being user-friendly. Granted, everybody pays a fee and nobody likes to pay for parking, but it gives you some flexibility and it's sort of a gentle nudge. Typically we say if somebody wants to go to an area, is $1 or $2 going to influence their behavior? Not so much for a customer, but for somebody who wants to sit there for 4 hours or 8 hours, we just want them to think twice and say, oh, there's a better place for me to park. So that's the type of thing that really we recommended, not going into the details, although we did recommend, that you look at that core area, beach and marina, but some kind of pilot area to say, there is a problem here as far as parking management goes. You really need to, if you want those spaces available and make it a little more welcoming for people driving in, you want those spaces turning. Pricing may be dynamic. Some communities we work with at the beach have high season, shoulder season, low season. A little more common on the East Coast, and we don't necessarily recommend it, but maybe you have an enforcement period during summer and not other times. And then times of day. We heard about surfers and down by the Rock, and we're not talking about the Rock right now, but overnight we wouldn't charge for parking. You have plenty of availability. Why would we do that? We only want to do that to influence behavior when there's not much availability. But figure out what those times are. Is dinner time? We know lunchtime's a problem, so probably start a little before lunchtime. Same with enforcing time limits to the extent we do it, and then maybe go just past dinner time when availability is an issue. When people, and I will say, some employees who might arrive at a certain time and just, dinner time. We always say enforce past 6, otherwise, some dinner wait staff, they might show up at 4 or 5. They can ride out a time limit or pay $1 or $2, and then they're there, say till 9 or 10. That's not what we want if somebody wants to come to the restaurant at 8 p.m., and still find a space. How people pay, again, pay by cell, it's getting easier. We recommended a kiosk, gives you some flexibility, it's cost effective. But even over the course of the study, we've seen more pay by cell options, even just text to pay, which some cities are exploring. And then an option to have longer or no time limits. That's my personal preference. Is can you say to somebody, okay, if you want to stay longer, you pay, but don't worry about that arbitrary cutoff. And maybe somebody does stay a long time, and that's not our goal. But day after day. And the people coming day after day are typically the abusers, if I say, of time limits. So that an hourly fee gives them a little nudge. But, for somebody who wants to come and go shopping, for my family or I, if we drive, 3 hours from Southern California or the Bay Area, that having that ability to find the parking, a couple of bucks given the time and the drive that we've invested, it's not, that onerous. So, but, we may want to stay longer and for good reason. We may go several establishments. In terms of enforcement, enforcement is not meant to be punitive per se. It's meant to encourage, a certain kind of behavior. So really there is a parking ambassador model. When I talk to our enforcement and technology people and they said, well, let's see, how would you drive a car down here? And I said, no, if you had enforcement, have somebody walking, have them in a friendly uniform, have them tell you, well, where can you see, the otters? Where can you see, where can you go to eat? That type of thing, a friendly presence on the street, but somebody who also says, hey, this car's been sitting here for a long time. They really shouldn't. You can start with warning citations, for the first 1 or 2, but for somebody who again and again and again has their car out in front of a business day in, day out, that's the person that we want to penalize. But we want a friendly model, for the public who comes here. So that's a recommendation. I think that's a nice way to do the program. Next, thank you. Paid parking at the Rock. You could consider that, in the summer, there is some availability issues. And although the congestion is not so much in the parking, it is in the roadway. I have a colleague, he really works on the financial side, and you get both of us in front of a meeting like this. And if you ask me, when do you charge for parking? And I say, when parking gets really difficult, when demand is greater than supply. With my colleague who works in a lot of infrastructure, he says, well, how much are you spending for all this infrastructure? That's when you should charge. And Morro Rock, you have a lot of infrastructure. And a lot of that infrastructure is getting congested. Can you manage the roadway by charging for parking. I think that gets into something more complicated. Would you have a trolley, a shuttle, something to get people out there, somewhere away, some way that people can get out to the rock, but not clogging up that roadway. That's something to think about. Again, from my demand and supply perspective, because of traffic and because that's a lot of infrastructure to manage, and there's a cost to it. So we were considering all that, but I think the Embarcadero is clearly the case for paid parking, and I think we'd want to separate that from considerations at Morro Rod. Next slide, please. So active benefits of actively managing parking, you turn over the prime spaces because the short-term people show up and park there. The long-term people step back and find another place to park. People find parking easier. Increased coastal access. Any plan you make, the Coastal Commission is going to look very closely at this. And when we talk to the Coastal Commission, their purview, their mission is to make sure the public have access to the coast. And, there's a good argument to say the public does not have that much access, when the parking spaces are all taken up. So, there is increased access when people who make that trip and they say, I know I can find a space. So overall, we say it sort of unlocks that locked up parking that you saw in all those red spaces. More visitors are able to come right down to the Embarcadero, shop and dine. Some respects, some locals who may say, oh, I would never go down there in summer. They know now that they can go down to, a restaurant and if they pay $1 or $2, they have the option. Right now, it's fair to say a lot of times if you go down to the Embarcadero in summer or an off-season weekend, you can't find parking, but you never know. It's rolling the dice. Next slide, please. So other things, let's see, improve pedestrian access. This was an interesting one. We had a number of planners working on this. And one of them said, maybe they don't want to turn spaces. Maybe it's okay if the cars sit there all day. And I know that this is ultimately a policy decision. But then we began discussing and said, well, if the cars aren't turning anyway and everything's full and most of the driving public can't find a space, do you even need those spaces at all? Would you remove, once the capacity is limited as it is, do you just say, some of those on-street spaces, wider sidewalks, better pedestrian access? And you may or may not want to do that. But I think the point being that if the spaces aren't really serving a lot of people and a lot of people visiting, they're not very useful. If a space turns every 2 hours over 10 hours, you're serving, 5 times as many people. And there's an argument to say that the cars that pay for parking, and there is a study on this, tend to have more people, tend to be, families or groups of friends. The car sitting there may just be one person who's, working down there or doing something else. So that's something to consider. Maintain a free parking area. This is all about choice. And what we're saying is right now when parking gets congested, choice is limited. So a free parking area, for people who are willing and able to park a little bit farther away, make that free. Part of increasing the capacity is using spaces that aren't being put to use right now. And even we heard in some of our meetings, that people, whether it's fishermen, people working down, at the Embarcadero, they want to drop off equipment, bring it by. Well, even in today's congested environment, maybe it's hard for them to do that. With some kind of paid parking, with potentially enforced loading zones, people can go. They can bring their trucks, bring their gear down there, find a space, unload it, but then don't leave your large vehicle there. Move it away, maybe just 3 blocks, but that way the people who come down there to visit can find space as well. So all of this increases utilization and really balance things out. This is, engineering is capacity. This is really economics, resource allocation to make the most of your asset, because the parking is a real public asset. It's land in coastal California. It has value, and people recognize that, and they're driving and putting their cars on there. Next slide, please. Let's see, downtown, maintain the existing 2-hour time limit, but maybe consider enforcing it a little more if you're going to have it, because here's the thing. It's the customer who comes in and is not there very often, maybe from San Luis Obispo or, the Bay Area, who says, oh, 2 hours, I can't park here that long, I better move my car. it's the person working there who says, and not to knock employees, and we want to be mindful that they need parking, but it's the person working there who says, they never enforce. I know, I come here every day. So we do encourage, some active enforcement. Doesn't have to be every day, every hour, and not so punitive, but just something to say, okay, keep these spaces in front of these businesses and those little red blocks that we saw, keep them moving along so there's a space or two available. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I think these are my slides, Stefan, so we can get to you after that to conclude. So thank you for that presentation. And as Stefan alluded to, there's been several meetings that have been held since the study was completed back in April. We presented to the Public Works Advisory Board, Harbor Advisory Board, Planning Commission. In fact, the Harbor Advisory Board had a subcommittee which met with various parking users, such as employees and liverboards and leaseholders, and the Embarcadero Master Lease Group has met with us and reviewed it and talked internally. The Chamber of Commerce has reviewed the report. Visit Morro Bay, which is our new TBID, reviewed it. And the Chamber CEO and myself walked the waterfront several months ago to engage with the business owners and employees down there about this. Through all that input, we received a lot of thoughts and considerations, concerns, ranging from sort of philosophical discussions down to the nitty gritty, like, here's my particular issue in this particular area in this particular day and set and time. And you said, hey, those detailed questions could be ironed out, but we just want to know generally what overall is there concerns or support for this. And by and large, I think everybody sees what this report has demonstrated is the impacts that we see in Embarcadero, especially how it can get log jammed and very hard to get cars parked. It's not very efficient. It's not necessarily about making money for the city so much as driving economics and efficiency in our parking, which to increase parking spaces through engineering is very expensive, as Stefan was alluding to, but perhaps economics can create more efficiency. So in thinking of all those things through, what I heard loud and clear from community members and those we engage with is that we need to develop clear goals around if a parking management system is pursued, particularly around how you use revenues and that they be used for waterfront needs and public access. Groups want to be engaged throughout the parking management process, especially as you start to get into detailed considerations. Now, of course, we've been very clear that we want to make sure we're not missing key aspects, but we can't satisfy everybody because then there would be no parking management system that would meet all those needs. But we still need to hear them out, make sure we're taking them in consideration best we can. Account for all the variety of parking needs. We heard about employees who park down there, business owners who do that, folks who are dropping off for, being there for a longer term. We have recreational fisher folks, we have commercial fisher folks, we have liverboards. There's a lot of needs for parking in a very constrained area. So how best to kind of serve those interests. Definitely a concern for maintaining free parking for longer term parkers. And Stefan's study alluded to, there's an underutilized resource near the stacks. Now, the harbor is using that for boat storage as well as for the RV camping program. Those are both short-term programs that could be moved along if we were to pursue a parking management system. So they were intentionally created as sort of temporary programs and not long-term programs. So we still have the availability and flexibility to turn that into a quote-unquote free parking lot. And then we heard considerations about employees who get out later at night on their evening shifts and making sure there was consideration for employee safety if they had to walk further to their cars. Based on the input we received and the great work of Walker Consultants, we recommend the following 5 items. These are more of at the high level, not necessarily getting into the nitty gritty, but based on the results of the study, we think there's a case to be made to pursue parking management, particularly with paid parking in the Embarcadero. That we conduct further assessment and analysis of paid parking at Morro Rock parking lots. As we understand, there's a different dynamic in play compared to the Embarcadero. But there still could be a case that paid parking is needed. I think it warrants further discussion before going down that path. That staff consult with the California Coastal Commission, because we know we would need their blessing for paid parking, as it could be construed as an impediment to coastal access, whereas we believe the study has shown that it in fact has the opposite effect. But that would need to be something a case we need to make to the staff and then bring it forward as a coastal development permit. We want to seek conditional input from waterfront parking user groups. And as a first step towards implementation, we would recommend development of a paid parking pilot program for the core Embarcadero areas. We don't want to specify exactly what those are. I think there's a little bit of thought that needs to go into it. But we'd want to develop that and bring it back to council for consideration before moving forward. That way you have a sense of true costs for getting something up and running, the permitting that would need to be embarked upon with Coastal Commission after hearing back from them, potential revenues that could be kicked in, could be received, and how that compares to the costs and all those good things, as well as input from user groups that we've received. So that would be our recommendation. Both Stefan and myself are available to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Scott, very much. Stefan, thank you for an excellent report. Very easy to understand and read. We appreciate it, and thank you for your presentation this evening. And I just want to thank our city manager for, jumping on this and finally getting something done for us with regard to a parking management program. So, Scott, thanks to you and your staff for realizing this was an important goal of the city and bringing it forward. Also want to thank all of the groups that you described that gave input throughout the city. Thanks to those folks for weighing in on this. With that, I'll go ahead and open up council questions. Any council member questions for either Scott or Stefan? And if you could take down the presentation, Scott, so I can see the full screen. Perfect. Thank you so much. Councilmember Ford, I see your hand, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of comments and one question. So I'll start with my comments. I would like to, well, first I want to thank you guys for this great presentation. Stefan and Scott, you've done a great job and left me with virtually no questions, but I do have a few. One of them, my question is, do we need to create, and this was actually brought up by the EML representatives, do we need to create a committee of representatives to weigh in on the details of the plan and implementation if we do move forward with the pilot program? So I don't know, that would be for you, Scott, or?
Yeah, the Harbor Advisory Board has a subcommittee, which I think would be probably a good place to apply that to. And I think there's an openness from that perspective, and making sure that there's voices of those who utilize those parking areas most frequently, to include leaseholders, businesses, commercial and recreational fishing, liverboards, et cetera. So I think that's sort of in the works, and I think they could kind of combine those into one. But having it be part of the city's kind of overall advisory board infrastructure would probably be helpful, because then there could be a direct linkage back to the HAB and then back to council from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. My second question, actually, I just would like, if you could just clarify for the folks who are concerned about, the redevelopment of the Embarcadero versus paid parking, if we put in paid parking, does that inhibit or delay development of, better circulation and, pedestrian access and, better areas for cycling and whatnot. I know in the report it says, improved pedestrian access, but how, can you just clarify for the folks that are worried that will never happen if we just start doing paid parking?
I think they can be mutually supportive, and Stefan can weigh in on this. I think, as far as when the redesign of the Embarcadero would take place, I mean, it's several years in the making, but I know that sort of has been a goal, at least in previous councils, because we know there's some really significant pinch points in certain segments of the Embarcadero on very narrow walkways, and of course adding infrastructure in those narrow pathways is challenging. So I think pay by cell becomes a nice alternative in those spots. So I think you could put paid parking in there, and if we decided that we wanted to remove those parking spaces, I don't think one would stop the other. I think they could be supportive, but I'd really like to hear what Stefan has to say about that.
I agree. Based on what I understand of the future plans, that I don't think one would get in the way of the other. I think that the infrastructure is somewhat flexible. Part of it might be how the public perceives what's going on at different times, but yes, it shouldn't be such a major endeavor that it would get in the way of your longer term plans.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarification for the folks that are listening in, and I know that it was mentioned many times to me by locals here of that concern. So thank you for doing that. And then I have one last comment / question, I guess. I witness often the issue with commercial loading and unloading, and I understand that we're on the low end of priority here in Morro Bay, compared to other cities around us for this. And so because of that, we often have parking spaces that are being blocked by, and I should say traffic as well, blocked by commercial trucks. So I would like for city staff, if we do move forward with this pilot program, that we take into consideration commercial and loading and unloading zones, and designating that and giving those spaces so that we promote safety on the Embarcadero and we stop blocking traffic. So I just wanted to put that out there.
That's good. Just if that's key for your colleagues, just make that potentially part of the motion. But I definitely hear that loud and clear. And that was interesting enough. One of the things we were talking about doing a pilot program during the first COVID summer to restrict to one lane of traffic to help encourage people to kind of utilize the streets, to park lots, et cetera. And one of the key concerns other than hearing about loss of parking was, how to deal with all the loading and unloading. And so that was very, very key. If we were going to do some kind of programmatic approach, that there'd be some identified spaces. Of course, that takes away spaces for other uses, but there's a lot, because like I said, that's the key theme here. There's a lot of demand and different user groups in that area, so we'd have to find a way to balance all of that. So that's really good input.
Yeah, and I want to say that I recognize the fact that it does take away parking spaces, and I understand that is an issue, and this is coming from me being concerned about safety as a priority. And right. So, as much as I want to increase traffic to those areas and parking spaces, we do have to consider the safety component and the narrow street and the availability for people to get through safely, right. Including emergency vehicles when traffic is blocked both ways.
Right.
So just wanted to put that out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Ford. Councilmember Addis, I see your hand next, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had 2 questions, excuse me, about this. And if we do a pilot program, I'm just wondering what will be done for employees during that pilot program. And I've heard from a couple employees who work on the Embarcadero with 2 main concerns. One is safety at night, even though Morro Bay is an incredibly safe community, but safety walking late at night to parking that might be farther away, and how we would ensure safety even during the pilot program. And then the other concern I heard is that it's really hard for workers who are making a retail wage to then need to pay to be able to go to work. And in that conversation, I kind of talked about, lots of people pay to go to work, but a lot of people who pay to go to work are in jobs that are paid higher than retail jobs. And so the impact can be disproportional on people who are working retail jobs to pay $1 an hour. It can really reduce your hourly wage quite a bit when you're working a retail job. So what would we do? And then I guess the thing I would add to that is we're in the great, not the Great Recession.
Resignation?
The Great Resignation.
Shuffle.
And I wouldn't want to push anybody else out of the workforce because they, all of a sudden started to feel like they couldn't afford to go to a retail job on the Embarcadero and Morro Bay.
Yeah, those are excellent questions. I'll let Stefan talk about the safety one after I cover the first one, because he had some interesting ideas when this was brought up, I think, at the Planning Commission. But as far as the workers piece, it's a good point. I think the pilot is intended to sort of suss those things out. One of the reasons why we want to maintain free parking is precisely for that user group. One of the reasons is for that user group so that they can find a place to park. They may have to come a little bit earlier, right? But we don't necessarily want them parking right in front of a business because, as Stefan said, they may be parking there for 8 hours. If that was turning over every couple hours, that would be potentially 4 to maybe 8 more customers who would be coming through the door versus 0. So it's just not an efficient use of space. So making sure that there is free parking available for employees, I think it gets at that issue. But of course, the pilot is intended to sort of check that and make sure that's correct and true. But Stefan had an idea about safety. Of course, I think you identified it, Councilmember Addis. We do have a very safe community, very, very few incidents of the kind of thing I think people would be concerned about occurring. Perhaps Chief Cox will want to weigh in on that, but I'll let Stefan talk about one of his ideas.
Okay, thank you. And again, with regard to employees, there is no intention here of charging employees. It's just to make sure, in a system like this, in any commercial area, we do want to prioritize the visitors, the customers, and the idea really is hopefully you'd be getting more customers, which would ultimately, help the employees, including, those who wait tables and rely on tips. We prioritize the customers, and then, we're helping the employees that way. With regard to safety, I think that's a couple of things. We would want to make sure that when we did this, that there was ideally, not ideally, we want to make sure approximate, well-lit parking area. And with the revenue that, you generate from parking, would you have something like a walk service, better lighting, something that says any revenue that is thrown off from this, because revenue is not the point. The whole thing is to make the Embarcadero work better. Apply some of that to helping employees, park a little farther so that it's not a worrisome or unpleasant experience. There is that narrow strip along the Embarcadero. You do have, the bluffs and the difference in grade, but it's not that big a distance. And, to say that, with some of the revenue from parking every night, could you have a walk service, somebody from the ambassador I mentioned, or, law enforcement, or someone out there, that would be where some of that revenue could and should go. But in some respects, if we're saying that the employees are worried, is it the reverse, that the employees are walking close, are parking close, then where are the customers parking? It's still, we really want to utilize all of that, and I don't think that's a reason not to do it, but we do absolutely want to be mindful that people feel safe, and I think there's an opportunity to use revenue for that purpose.
Thank you, Councilmember Addis, for those great questions. Councilmember Heller, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you very much. Scott Collins, thank you so much for moving this forward. Obviously, it's something that's been important for a long time with everything else you're juggling. You've done a great job in bringing this to the city, and I know it's taken a long time to get us here, and I appreciate your work on it very, very much. I think bringing Walker on board is absolutely the right group. This is a group that's been designing and building multiple-story parking garages for many, many years in California and other adjacent states. Very familiar with the company. And Steph, I'm glad to have you on board. The questions I have at this point is, it looks to me like the recommendation is to have a pilot program for the Embarcadero from Beach to Marina Street, which I think you've identified as Area B. Is that correct? Is that what the report is asking or suggesting?
Yes, I think definitely that seems to be the core area of Councilmember Heller, but I think there's a little bit of wonder if we also may want to look perhaps to the north as well. We have some, Stefan's throwing in a curveball, but some of those off-street parking lots up, by kind of the Measure D area, those are significantly impacted on not only weekdays and weekends in the summer, but also weekends in the off season. So we may want to look at two distinct areas to be able to test this out. But definitely the beach marina area is almost always impacted, as we all know. That's the kind of the most narrowest strip of the Embarcadero. So I don't think we want to limit ourselves too much by saying this is precisely what the pilot will be. But we also don't want to expand so much that it's the entire Embarcadero, then it's really not a pilot, right? So we're trying to find that sweet spot, if that makes sense.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, most of the complaints I've gotten over the last 3-4 years have been from sub-area A along the Embarcadero. Would it be possible, which would also address the issues with the triangle lot, which I think are really important to address, could we have a pilot program that would include sub-area A and B? So it would basically start from, I think it's L1 down to Marina Street. Would that be a possibility?
Stephen, curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I think that would be a possibility. We want to do this where people can't find spaces, and certainly, as you pointed out, those lots up to the north are part of that. We'd be absolutely mindful of the possibility of some spillover, and that we need to take into account. But really, we're not. We're dealing with the same number of vehicles or the same number of spaces, but just hopefully turning those more quickly. So overall, though, I think that's, looking at the maps right now, there is a lot of red up there. So I think, we'd want to be cognizant of who those people are, what their needs are, why it's getting so full. But there's certainly a case to be made for wanting to create more availability up there.
So we could conceivably combine those two areas as part of the pilot program?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of kicking it around, like Stefan said, and talking to the user groups
Sure.
and bringing that back and maybe presenting some options for council.
Yeah, okay. And then the other question I have is...
Jeff, could you repeat what those two areas were?
Sub-area A and sub-area B, they're both included in the Embarcadero, but the one area is from Beach Street north,
Gotcha.
and then the other area is Beach Street south to Marina.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I just didn't quite hear it. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah. And the other question I have is, what is the pilot program going to look like? I guess my concern is this: we've waited so long, at least in my mind, to address this issue. I'm concerned that the pilot program is going to be 5 meters here and 6 down the road, and then 2 years later we'll study the impact of that, and then we'll go to phase 2 and phase 2. In other words, 20 years from now we'll have a complete parking program. So, Stefan, I don't mean to insult you, but could you tell me kind of what a pilot program is going to include and not include?
Well, I think, the best thing about a pilot program in this case is really a proof of concept. I've seen instances where, somebody is really uncomfortable. Maybe they don't want paid parking or a meter, in front of their business, but then they see that in front of the business down the street, cars aren't sitting all day. They see cars turning. And I think that's the best opportunity about the pilot program is the proof of concept. So I think, we want to attack, maybe not the right word, but, focus on the biggest problem areas. I don't think it's 5 meters here, 2 meters there. I think, we want something fairly contiguous. That said, your point about the two areas makes sense. I think it's, where do you really have a problem? And that's, where is the urgency? And you address it there, you look at that, and then consider, it's a pilot. Has that worked? Is what hasn't worked, what has worked? And then that gives you the opportunity to reevaluate and say, we keep it or we expand it. And of course, it's not fair to say a pilot if, I have been involved in pilots where, they decide not to do it. Now, I haven't seen a pilot that didn't work. I think, always we see increased turnover. We see the benefits. So I think it's, it's maybe even a 1 phase, 2 phase, at most 3 phases, but I don't think you want to sprinkle it along. But really, it's a proof of concept. I think people see this, and I think they get it once they see it. And it's charging for parking is so counterintuitive. And I think the only way to sort of break through that is to show people how it works.
Okay. What else? Those are my questions. Obviously, I have some comments, but those are the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none. Okay. We'll go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for item C-1 on the agenda. Public comment is now open. And Anthony, do you have any public comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Heading. I see Kyle Finger with his hand raised. Okay, Kyle, you are unmuted.
Welcome, Kyle.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I wanted to voice my support for the parking plan and moving from the current first come, first served system to a paid system. The revenue, like was mentioned, could be used for a variety of things such as security, cleaning, streetscape improvements, ambassadors, improved bike and walking and transit. I don't like driving to the Embarcadero right now because there's a lot of people and a lot of cars, and it's hard to find a spot right now. I much prefer biking over to the Embarcadero from northern Morro Bay over the new pedestrian bridge that was built a couple years ago. So that's great that project was completed. One thing I noticed in the report is that with most cars parked less than 3 hours currently, I question the effectiveness of instituting a 3-hour limit. So if that could be investigated further, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that. Anthony, next public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Currently, I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll go ahead and close public comment for item C-1, bring it back to council. I think I've captured the comments that were additional to the staff report. I'll just summarize by saying, if possible, if this could get the automobile off of the Embarcadero, I would be happy, but perhaps that's a discussion that might occur at a later date. I think there are significant safety issues when I'm down in the Embarcadero, especially on the weekend, with people driving 3 miles an hour trying to look for a parking space. And, I won't say it's every time, but I see cars veer. I see pedestrians walking across that I'm personally concerned about. And so with increased, with a potential pilot program that has paid parking that could increase the availability of spaces, improve turnover, I think that could be advantageous from a safety standpoint. I also see this as a revenue source for public improvements. We are sorely lacking capital, as we all know, for improvements on the Embarcadero. This does help fund, could potentially help fund a number of significant improvements that were noted in the presentation. And I think that's a very positive aspect of this. I do believe it improves coastal access. I do believe it will be appealing to the Coastal Commission because of that. And the continuous availability of more spaces down there will bring more people. I think it's good for business. I think retail will benefit from this in terms of Embarcadero customer turnover and the availability of more customers to be able to access the retail entities on the Embarcadero itself. With that, I took the comments that I heard, and I'll try this as a motion. And if I'm missing any of it, I'm happy to recapture it and restate the motion. but I would move that we recommend that, or that we authorize staff to, one, pursue a parking management system in the Embarcadero broadly that includes paid parking and is inclusive of sub-area A and B. Number two, that we conduct further analysis on the Morro Rock parking area. Three, that we consult with the California Coastal Commission staff. Four, seek additional input from the parking user group. And that was articulated well by Councilmember Ford. Thank you for that. Five, as a first step towards implementation, develop a paid parking pilot program and bring it back for council consideration. I'd love to put a timeline, but I know that would be unfair to staff. But I'll just say as soon as practical. And then 6 is new. Evaluate potential alternatives to accommodate employee parking on the Embarcadero. Thank you, Councilmember Addis, for recognizing that. And then number 7, include an evaluation of industrial delivery zone parking. And I think that was Councilmember Ford. Did I get that correctly, Councilmember Ford? I tried to just
yes. Yeah.
Okay, great.
You said it nicer than I did.
No, I thought I got the concept, but I wanted to make sure. So that's include an evaluation of industrial delivery zone parking and related issues. And so I tried to capture everything out of the comments that were made, and I'll go ahead and call that my motion and see if it gets a second.
I'd like to second your motion.
All right.
And also say that I'm thrilled that none of the alternatives showed up in your list, so that we are moving forward is what I'm hearing here, and I'm delighted.
Thank you, Councilmember Barton. So motion by Mayor Heading with the additional items noted, including the staff report items. Second by Councilmember Barton, and I'll take further comments. Councilmember Heller.
Yes, Mayor. Could you clarify the motion with respect to the Triangle parking lot? Would it include looking at that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The comment that I have also that I wanted to add to this is we've got, I think the city's done an outstanding job of doing outreach. The various advisory boards have talked about this and discussed this for a long time. The Chamber of Commerce has weighed in on it. Lots of good comments, lots of thoughts, lots of concerns. I firmly believe that the city of Morro Bay has the same issues that most coastal towns do. We have tourist traffic, we have fishermen, we have liveaboards, we have employees, and I'm absolutely confident that Walker and their folks can come up with solutions for all of the issues and concerns that everybody has. And I hope that the conversation continues as we go forward. I'm very excited about this and very happy to be at this point. So just wanted to say that. And thank you again, Scott Collins, for moving this forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Councilmember Addis, please.
I forgot to say my thank yous earlier, but I wanted to thank HAB in particular. I was at the HAB meeting when this was brought forward and presented, and I know that HAB has been working on this since 2017, and we got to see part of that report. I also heard from the HAB subcommittee about this, and I'm glad to hear that that would be a natural fit to weave the subcommittee from HAB into the outreach group. And then, of course, thank our city manager. The master leaseholders, I really want to appreciate. I know that group has grown, and I just want to say it's very helpful to hear sort of a unified input from a group there. And then I think the chamber really said it best when they said that free isn't actually always free, and that it's important for us to take into consideration what we feel like we can, want to, and should subsidize, and where we need to recover costs costs so that we can improve the product of Morro Bay, which has been an ongoing conversation for our city. And then finally, I appreciate the comments about what we could do if we do generate funds from this in terms of employee safety, but I also want to urge that we take that into consideration during the pilot itself. It doesn't change the motion and it doesn't change my support of the motion, but I also think if it's going to be a true pilot, that we want to have that in the forefront as we go through that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Addis. Appreciate that. And with that, if there are no other comments, I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Henning?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. That ends this item. And again, thank you, Stefan, for being here. Appreciate your work and look forward to further hearing from you in the future. Scott Collins, excellent job, as has been stated. Appreciate all the advisory boards, the chamber, and all of the entities that were mentioned. I just have to echo all of that was said. Thanks for this item. That brings us to item C-2. This is the adoption of Resolution 79-21, pledging a funding commitment for intersection improvements at SR1, SR41, and Main Street. And let me open by saying this is not an approval of either a stoplight and or a roundabout. That's not the essence of this discussion. I just wanted to clarify that. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Kwolek and or Livick for their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Council. Good evening. Public Works Department is pleased to present on this item. Let me just pull it up here. Okay, and as you said, this is an item to adopt a resolution pledging a funding commitment for intersection improvements at State Route 1 and State Route 41 and Main Street at that intersection. I'll give some brief background. Actually, let me get my slideshow up here, sorry. Okay, and how do I switch that? There's a way to do that. Okay, I believe you can all see that now. So a quick background, this intersection has been an issue for a very long time, and about 20 years ago, a roundabout solution was proposed. That eventually was never funded. And so then in 2016, the city or the city's consultant completed an intersection control evaluation. And that evaluation concluded that this intersection would fail at full build out of the city in 2040. There's a lot of issues there, namely that it's essentially two intersections operating as one unsignalized intersection. And because of that, we see congestion. In the staff report, we talk about how this is actually the intersection with the most wait times in the city, has some confusing traffic patterns. There's unfavorable pedestrian crossings and bicycle pathways, which is especially important because it's near a high school. There are environmental impacts. There's a lot of stop and go, which means that more CO2 is coming out of cars at that intersection. And it's also a deficient gateway to the city of Morro Bay. As most folks know, this is the main corridor that brings in visitors from the Central Valley. So the ICE, I'll call it, the evaluation explored two alternatives to improve level of service at the intersection. One was signalization, and the other was the roundabout. And the roundabout was the preferred alternative of the evaluation. That said, the city is still conducting an environmental evaluation of this intersection, and the decision will be coming back to City Council about whether to look at a roundabout or some other alternative after the environmental evaluation concludes. I do want to just give the visuals so we all know what we're talking about here. On the left, we have the signal control alternative. So this is from the ICE. As you can see, the footprint is not really modified all that much from what's currently there. You still have 6 entry points into this intersection, 2 from 41, 2 from Main, and then 2 onto State Route 1. And you have some crosswalks there for pedestrians, and then obviously there would be a signal in there guiding and controlling traffic. The second alternative is the roundabouts alternative, quite a bit of a bigger footprint. And here you can see very clearly that there are sidewalks and bicycle pathways to accommodate pedestrians. So those are the 2 alternatives. Mayor, you are correct. We are not deciding, or the City Council is not deciding on which alternative is the best one tonight. This actually has more to do with our funding partnership with SlowCog. So SlowCog should be in the house. We should have John and or Rich here available for questions at the end of the presentation. But SlowCog is the San Luis Obispo County Council of Governments, and they have to propose a list of local projects to Caltrans as part of their state transportation improvement plan. And so we've been on that list for quite some time, and they haven't seen a whole lot of progress because of the slow nature of the project. And so at this time, in order to continue to keep us on their project list for this intersection, for any intersection improvements, they are seeking a commitment from City Council to fund the remainder of the project costs, which are currently estimated to be at $2.5 million. And that's based on the roundabout alternative, which is the most expensive option. The SlowCog contribution will be at a maximum of $5.89 million, again, for a roundabout alternative. And so a lot of people have a question of, would SlowCog fund a signal alternative? They would consider doing that. It would be, the funding amount would be reduced proportionately because obviously the signalization alternative is less expensive. It's about half the cost. And so we would be getting half of the contribution from SlowCog. And that said, it's less secure funding in a way because the signalization alternative is seen as less competitive from SlowCog's perspective. And this is sort of the big point of the night. Should City Council choose not to pledge a funding commitment to SlowCog at today's meeting, they will withdraw support for any kind of funding for intersection improvements. So moving on, what is the fiscal impact to the city? Should the city choose to go forward? Well, the recommended pledge is for $2.5 million. And that's, of course, a minimum cost or an estimated minimum cost. And it would require the city to allocate an average of $633,000 per year for the next 3 years. If you add that up, or rather multiply it by 3 and then add the $600,000 that we've already budgeted for this year, you get to just about $2.5 million. And we have identified on the staff side some potential funding sources for this $2.5 million. We could use non-discretionary state highway account funds. We could use transportation impact fees, grant funding, general fund, and local option sales tax revenue, meaning measures Q and E. So that concludes the presentation. I'll state the recommendation again. We are recommending that the City Council adopt resolution number 7921, pledging a funding commitment for project costs for intersection improvements at intersection at State Route 1, State Route 41, and Main Street based on the roundabout alternative. And I'll take any questions.
Camera. There we go. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that summary of this issue. This issue has been discussed a number of times at the City Council. I think when I first got on council, the price was $3.8 million. And you can see over a period now of, this is my 7th year, how that price continues to go up and what we're facing today. I'm considering these comments part of the staff presentation since I am your representative on SlowCog, and want to note that we have been looking at the allocations to all of the projects in the regions over the last few months. There are a number of competitive projects with this, and we have been able to work with staff, whom I appreciate very much. I'm talking about the SLOCOG staff, especially John D'Annunzio and Rich Murphy, who have worked with us to try to keep this project alive from a funding standpoint. The commitment by SLOCOG is significant, as you have noted, $5.89 million, but it does require, at this point, a remainder match of approximately $2.5 million from the city, or pretty much a guarantee that we will seek to provide that funding through the establishment of this ordinance or resolution, I should say, this evening. The D-Day will be in December, when SLOCOG board will meet and basically do the final cut of projects. And again, thusly, that brings us here tonight to try to gain support for us making a commitment through the utilization of the funds that Greg has outlined, not in those specific dollar amounts in terms of so much coming from Measure E or Q, or so much coming from this or that, but that there is a source of funds that the city is committing to that in order to keep this project online. The school district has weighed in, as you saw in the staff report, is very concerned about safety issues at this intersection, and is very much supportive of seeing the project move forward as expeditiously as possible. And I appreciate their involvement in the past in meeting with Caltrans and SLOCOG folks to look at this. So that's just an extension of the staff report. And with that, I will go ahead and open it up for council questions. And we do have SLOCOG staff here as well. Councilmember Heller, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Approving this funding commitment tonight would not necessarily eliminate the possibility that signal crossing for pedestrians could possibly be added to this project in the future. Is that true? Is it a possibility?
You mean, Councilmember Heller, do you mean a roundabout alternative where there are signal crossings for pedestrians?
Yeah, I've seen them a number of places. They're quite common. And that's really my only concern. And I'm just, I want this to go forward, but I'm just wondering if we could bring that up and address that as part of the final design, possibly.
That's an excellent question. And as you know, we are in the environmental phase of the project. So that is something that would be explored in the next phase. But I would ask John D'Annunzio if he has any opinion on that, whether or not adding pedestrian signals would affect in any way our funding for this project.
Hi, good evening, City Council, Mayor Heading, City Council. I'm John D'Annunzio, Regional Transportation Planner with SLOCOG. So like Mr. Qualick said, tonight we're really looking for a funding commitment, not a transaction. However, when it comes to considering alternatives and internal analysis, that is very much a part of the environmental phase, the PA and ED phase, exploring options, public discussion, etc. So I would assume I'd probably want to check with Rob Leivik to see what some of the early concept designs were. Those ICE evaluations, section control evaluations, are really just the start of the process. It's almost like kind of being a freshman in college, and we still kind of have 3 or 4 years to go before you decide which major you're going to take.
Okay, great. Thank you for those comments, Mr. D'Annunzio. Thanks for joining us tonight. That's my only question.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Appreciate that. Other questions of staff? Seeing no hands raised, I'll go ahead and go to public comment. This is public comment for item C-2 on our agenda this evening. Public comment is now open. And Anthony, do we have any public comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I see Betty Winholtz with her hand raised. Okay, Betty, you should be unmuted.
Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. I want to disagree with some statements that have been made already regarding the fact that this is not a vote on whether or not we're doing the roundabout or not. And it may not be a direct vote, but it certainly is a backdoor type of vote because all this money is dependent on the roundabout alternative. And that's one of my points. The other three is on the page 1 of the staff report, it says, quote, plans to decide a roundabout. And on page 2, it talks about that the evaluation has chosen the roundabout. And then on page 3, it talks about the benefits of the environment for this, which is a direct contradiction of what ICE discovered in its step 2 process in terms of how this is really more not environmentally friendly because of the size of it, because of all the resources it will take to build it, because of all that the trees and stuff that will be knocked down. So I guess I just want us to be a little bit more honest about this, because if you're accepting the money or you're saying that this is what we want, then we're really looking at the roundabout because it has been decided this is your goal. And so kind of like the WRF, where it never really came to a vote of the people, and yet that's what council decided. So I kind of feel this is the same way. Definitely you're headed in that direction. I think you need to be honest about that. And I think you need to understand the ramifications of that, which I pointed out in my letter to you. That through the public comment, and where it talked about those issues that were raised in the ICE that were not brought before you, and that my concern about that is that I don't believe Ms. Ford is familiar with this. The two-step study, I'm sure Ms. Barton is not familiar with the two-step study, and I don't know if the other three of you are or not. So that's why I thought it was pretty important that you acknowledge the ICE and that what has been already declared about that, and that SLOCOG understand that this is still a very controversial issue in the city, and that it's not necessarily the best choice, and that signalization should still very much be on the plate and be looked at. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony, next public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Currently, I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
Great, thank you. Go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to council again. Either ask Mr. Qualick and or Mr. D'Annunzio to affirm the fact that no decision has been made on a roundabout, despite the comments that have been made by public comment. Is there anything you want to add to that, John? Or
yeah, if I could jump in, Mayor, and I appreciate you offering the opportunity to comment, and I'd like to thank Ms. Winholtz for her comments. This is obviously an important item, and it's a big project for the city. So to start with, the ICE evaluation did state that the roundabout alternative was the preferred alternative, but it's really important to note that the ICE evaluation is not binding. That was really just the very beginning of this project, and this project is evolving in real time. The decision on whether or not to approve a roundabout or some other solution at this intersection will come at a later time. But the fact is the city has to use one of the alternatives as the funding basis for the partnership that we're engaged with SLOCOG. And so at this time, because the roundabout is the preferred alternative of the ICE, because the state is requiring to look at it, requiring the city to look at the roundabout alternative first because of its environmental benefits, but also because it's the most expensive option. And therefore, if we use it as the funding basis, we have access to all the money that SLOCOG has made available to the city. And if we don't use the roundabout as the funding basis, then we won't have all that money held for us. Those are the reasons why we are using it really as the funding basis today. But again, the there is no decision right now on whether or not we will be building a roundabout at that intersection. And maybe Mr. D'Annunzio can confirm that what I've said is true from SLOCOG's standpoint.
John, you want to comment? Or Rob?
Just maybe a little bit on the rest of the process needed to move this project forward. We're in the project authorization, environmental determination. That means we need to complete preliminary engineering, which will finalize the projects that are in the environmental determination. So a CEQA document. That document will become coming to council probably mid next year, along with the preliminary engineering and a coastal development permit application. So that's the point where the city makes the decision of what design moves forward into preparation of plans, specifications, and estimates to ultimately go out to bid and construct this project. So we're a bit away from making that decision on what the design will be for this intersection improvements. The ICE study is been reviewed by Caltrans Traffic Ops. So it's traffic engineers looking at what the best operational strategy is for this intersection. And the state's policy now on roundabouts requires them to look at a roundabout option for intersection control. I think that's all I have to offer at this time.
Rob, thanks for that clarification. I appreciate that. And your articulation of the next steps in the process. That's very helpful. Without a doubt, this has been on the books for a number of years, and we're at a turning point. I can tell you that without this action being approved tonight, the impact would be from SLOCOG, the loss of their commitment of $5.89 million, the discontinuation of any further consideration of the project at this time, and the loss of what I would consider to be significant environmental and safety benefits to the city regarding this nightmare, in my opinion, intersection. This is also a project that is one that just happens to be occurring in the gateway to the city. I think something that's very important in addition to the environmental and safety issues that were outlined previously. Costs are not going down. And as we've seen historically, they will continue to rise. And so with that, I very much will make the recommendation that we adopt Resolution 79-21, pledging a funding commitment for project costs for intersection improvements for the intersection at SR1, SR41, and Main Street based on the roundabout alternative noted.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Heading for staff recommendation, second by Councilmember Heller. Any further discussion or comment?
I have one.
Yes, Councilmember Addis, please.
One quick question. All that doesn't change my support for your motion or Councilmember Heller's second, but if there were in the future, as we get closer to looking at a roundabout or other options, if there were any data around climate and the intersection between climate, knowing that our council voiced unanimous support for some kind of a goal in the area of climate action, I'd love to have that data come forward. I know right now we're not at that decision-making point about what kind of intersection improvements to make, but as we get closer, I'd love to keep that on the radar.
So noted. I'm making that note now, and we'll be sure to bring that forward as we move forward. All right, seeing no further, is it?
I was just going to make a comment that one of the reasons that roundabouts score so highly in the environmental area is that they keep the cars moving, and so that's it's an air quality issue that helps them be so well regarded, and why they have become a popular option. As I drive sometimes over to the valley and back, I go through several of them, and it's you're not stopping, you just keep moving, and so it's an air quality thing.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Councilmember Ford, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Qualick, for that report. And also for the clarification from both Mr. D'Annunzio and Mr. Levick. As a parent of a high schooler at MBHS, or I had one daughter already graduate from there and one who's currently there, I see constantly the issues that, my daughter actually says, it's like playing Frogger. I don't know if you're familiar with that game, but kids are dodging cars are dodging kids. It's just a nightmare, and I hope that a tragedy doesn't occur before something does happen to improve that double intersection. So, moving forward with this tonight, I think is important because, as the mayor pointed out, time is money. And I want to make sure that no matter what the outcome is, that we have secured that extra funding. So I appreciate all the effort that has been put into this, and I appreciate that Slow Cog has been patient with us and has held on to the funds and waited for this moment for us to possibly continue on. So anyways, with that, I'm just saying that I'm really excited to see something eventually happen. It won't be in my children's, time at the high school, but future children, and of course, visitors coming into our town, and all the above, right? It's just important for something to happen, and to happen as quickly as possible. So that's just my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ford. I appreciate that. Okay, if there are no further comments, I'll go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0.
Thanks again to staff for an excellent report, Greg. Very much appreciated. And John, thank you. John D'Annunzio from SLOCOG. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for working closely with the city on this. And personally, we look forward to working with you in the future as we move forward. That ends this item. That brings us to item C-3. This is a approval of a master services agreement with Kinderleiter de Llamas. Thank you, Councilmember Addis, for correcting me. I know you would have. De Llamas and Associates to provide tax and fee administration services. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Ms. Johnson Rios. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, are you seeing that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's see. Right, so I know you have a lengthy agenda tonight, so I will be brief. As you mentioned, the item before you, I'm just going to call them HDL, but you did a wonderful job, Mayor Heading. Item before you is to contract with HDL to provide business tax certificate administration, transient occupancy tax administration, and audit services in both areas. So a little background, I think as you're aware, the city, per the municipal code, issues business tax certificates to all businesses that do business in Morro Bay. And there's some information here about the number of current business tax certificates and annual revenue. Similarly, per the municipal code, we do collect transit occupancy tax revenues for rental stays of less than 30 days. And city staff currently performs these functions, the city does not currently audit business tax or TOT revenue. As you may recall, finance staff positions were eliminated during COVID, and they've been partially but not fully restored. So remaining staff has absorbed some of these duties, and we've also experienced some pretty high turnover as part of the great, what did Mr. Collins call it, the Great Resignation or the Great Shuffle recently. And so these capacity constraints unfortunately did cause some delays in business license processing, not the level of customer service that we of course strive to provide. So with this background in mind, as outlined in your staff report, the city, oops, I'm sorry about that. I'm still getting used to this, let's see, this display in Zoom here. Okay, I think that's what we're looking for. Okay. Thank you. So one of the alternatives in the staff report is to continue administering services with city staff, but doing so would require more fully restoring the positions that were eliminated due to COVID. And another option is to direct staff to proceed with an RFP and do a full formal RFP for these services. Staff has conducted extensive research and now spoken with 6 cities who use HDL for these services. And we are not confident that a full RFP would yield another company that could provide the full range of services that HDL can provide and the high level of customer service that they are known for providing. So with that, there are 3 primary benefits to this agreement, primarily efficiency improvements. Sure.
You're sharing the wrong screen.
Okay.
So go to.
Is that?
Go to stop share.
I apologize.
No worries, Sarah.
Let's see.
So go there.
Yeah.
Display settings. And drop down swap. Now go to pay scheme. Go here. Go to share screen.
I thought I was, and I switched back and forth again and again. So is this the one? Is this the one? No.
Yeah, that's shit. Hit okay.
It's okay. We've read the staff report.
Yeah, and then so that's your screen. I'm just need to advance on that.
It's a good staff report. Yeah.
Okay.
So just click on it.
This is Anthony from AG Video. If you go to
Nice picture of the rock. So
by using
Okay.
the slideshow heading,
Oh, man.
and then
It's not showing. Oh, I actually want to show this screen.
all right, you got a nice picture of the rock
Doesn't
behind
matter.
you. Good staff report.
Okay. So I'm not sharing. I thought I was sharing this though. I am, right?
Yeah, so you just have to advance with your.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, you got it.
Hey.
Figure it out next time.
Okay. Sorry.
or if you go to slideshow next to the animations button there, it'll give you the option.
Okay.
To start slideshow, and it'll make your screen full.
Sorry about that. So I should have practiced Zoom. I have to admit, I am a Microsoft Teams girl, so I am getting used to the screen share on live with Zoom. So thank you for bearing with me, everyone. And I hear Councilmember Heller saying that you have all read the staff report, so you are fully familiar with this information. So I'll just breeze through. Really, this is going to provide efficiency improvements in line with prior analyses that recommended doing this type of contracting out, and in line with Council's more recent goals discussion surrounding staff capacity in alignment with our ability to implement kind of the broader policy goals that you've outlined. It also will provide enhanced customer service, and I do want to take a second to highlight the fact that this would provide online services 24/7, as well as a call center that would be staffed Monday through Friday. We do currently provide city staff answering the phones Monday through Friday, but we have less than one FTE dedicated to this. So anytime that person is taking time off, we can have some lag times. And so this would provide more robust customer service coverage than we're currently providing, which we hope would be a welcome change for our local businesses. And then finally, this is something that we're not doing now, as I mentioned. This would have the opportunity to capture some revenue for the city, both on the business tax certificate side and the TOT side. And the levels are really going to be dependent on the current levels of compliance. And so moving into the fiscal impact section, definitely don't want to oversell the revenue capture. So it really will depend on what HDL would find if council wants to move in this direction. But here are some rough estimates of what we think this would look like for the city on an annual basis. So based on our current level of business licenses, there's an annual fee of $16 per, consistent with what's in our master fee schedule for the renewal fee currently for business licenses. So that works pretty well. And that would be partially offset by, I'm assuming here, an 8% revenue capture, 8% of the city's current annual revenue for business license revenues. The city keeps 65% of that. So we would anticipate some level of offset, potentially higher than this. But again, as any good finance person, I'm making a conservative assumption here about the numbers. And so that would be the business license side. Short-term rental permits would work very similarly, where HDL would actually do the day-to-day administration and renewals. City staff would certainly be involved with the implementation of the new ordinance, but on an ongoing basis, HDL would then treat these as they would a business license and help us process the renewals. TOT would include administration of ongoing revenues and then audit services as well. And so again, that's an area where I have not assumed any revenue offset, but it is likely that there would be some revenue offset. Just have to wait and see what that would look like. So the total cost would actually be a reduction in revenues, and that's going to be in the ballpark of $79,000, again, dependent on the volume of these things fluctuating over time, and really highly dependent on any revenue capture that HDL may be able to help us with. So with that, the recommendation before you tonight is to authorize the city manager to enter into a master services agreement with HDL to provide these services. And I do want to remind you that this would be a multi-year agreement, so the city would have the flexibility to lock in these rates with just a CPI cost increase annually for a 3-year term with 2 additional options to renew, for 2 additional 3-year options to renew. And again, apologies for the poor screen sharing skills. I do want to, before I stop sharing my screen, let you know that Josh Davis with HDL is also on the meeting with us this evening. If you have any questions specifically for HDL, then of course I'm happy to take any questions as well. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Sarah. Not a problem at all. If I was doing it, the slides would be upside down. So no worries at all. With that, I'm going to open it up for any council questions you may have. Any questions of Sarah? Looking for raised hands. Not seeing any raised hands. Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for item C-3 on the agenda. Public comment is now open. And Anthony, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Heading. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay, thank you. I will close public comment on this item, bring it back to council, and either entertain a motion or further discussion at this time.
I'll move to approve this item.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Addis to approve item C3 according to staff recommendation, seconded by Councilmember Barton. Any further discussion? Councilmember Heller, yes, please.
Yes, I just want to say I am really happy to see this. I've wanted to audit TOT for many years. I'm really glad this has been brought forward, and I believe having an outside firm do it is exactly the right way to go. And I'm all about recapturing revenue, so I'm happy. This is great. Thank you.
And I'll be supporting the motion, and I'll echo your comments, Councilmember Heller. Sarah, I know that your staff turnover has been an issue. You've been very constrained, and I know that you're working deep in the pits right now to try to dig out of a lot of issues. And and I mean that with all due respect to you. And I think this is the right way to go. Something we've needed to do for a long time, and actually will result in improved revenues long term for the city. So I'll be supporting as well. Unless there are any other comments, I will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, that completes this item, and that brings us to item C-4. This is the introduction, first reading of ordinance number 645, adding chapter 8.18, specific regulations for collection and disposal reduction of organic waste recyclables and solid waste, to Title 8 of the Health and Safety of the Morro Bay Municipal Code. Mr. Qualick and Ms. Burlingame, you're up.
Thank you again, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
All right, let me. Okay, thank you, Mayor and City Council. This item is C4, the first reading of the ordinance entitled Specific Regulations for Collection and Disposal Reduction of Organic Waste, Recyclables, and Solid Waste, otherwise known as the SB 1383 ordinance. Before I begin, I'd like to say that this report and ordinance would not be possible without the hard work and dedication and many hours spent on working on this ordinance by our management analyst, Janine Burlingame, who I believe is on the call, and also Lana Lehman, who is a partner with our city attorney, Chris Newmeyer. They have put in an immense effort, and we've been very pleased with that. So jumping right in, I did give a presentation to City Council 2 meetings ago with just a general overview of SB 1383. So a lot of this may be a reminder, but I think it's important background for the ordinance because it really explains why we're doing the ordinance. So I might skip through some of it, but you will have the opportunity, of course, to ask me questions after the presentation. So to begin with, why are we even doing this? Organic waste is the largest waste stream in California. California disposed of approximately 27 million tons of organic waste in 2017. 6 million tons of food waste is thrown away every year, and 1 in 5 children and 1 in 8 Californians are food insecure. So these are some pretty serious issues that the policymakers came together and to address them, they came up with 1383. So also just a note on methane gas, it is emitted by landfilled organic waste, and that contributes to climate change by with rising sea levels, reduced snowpack, wildfires, drought, and heat waves. So again, SB 1383 is designed to reduce organic waste and thereby reduce methane gas emissions. The timeline, you saw this 2 meetings ago. There is a bit of an update in it. In 2016, SB 1383 was passed into law. The goal was that by 2020, there'd be a 50% reduction of landfilled organic waste. That hasn't quite happened. COVID hit. And actually, the jurisdictions, including the city, did not receive final regulations until 1 year ago, so in November of 2020. Mm-hmm. And the regulations contained in SB 1383 will take effect on January 1st, 2022, just a month and a half away or so. And that includes organics collection service to all residents and businesses, an edible food recovery program, education and outreach, some procurement regulations, as well as monitoring compliance and conducting code enforcement. This is the new item. This is a result of SB 619, which we'll discuss briefly, but by July 1st of the coming year, if the city is not in full compliance with regulations, the city will have to submit a notice with corrective action, with a corrective action plan to Cal Recycle. We currently don't anticipate that will be the case for the city of Morro Bay, but again, if we are not anticipating full compliance, By about March, as I understand, the notice would be sent in late March, then we would have to send the action plan to CalRecycle. And of course, January 1st, 2024 is when local governments will actually be required to enforce SB 1383. The goals are by 2025, a 75% reduction in landfilled organic waste and a 20% increase in recovery of currently disposed edible food. So I mentioned SB 619. This is a more recent law that was signed by the governor. It was passed by the Senate recently on September 9th and the Assembly on the 8th, and then signed by the governor about a month ago on October 5th. And it addresses concerns of not being able to fully comply with SB 1383 regulations by January 1st, 2022, due to a redirection of staffing resources to deal with the pandemic. So many of the jurisdictions in the state were concerned that they wouldn't be in compliance by January 1st. SB 619 was an attempt to mitigate those concerns. Ultimately, it authorizes local jurisdictions not in full compliance with the regulations to submit the notification that I mentioned on the previous slide. And also, administrative civil penalties for violations would be waived if the jurisdiction implements actions proposed in the notification to remedy noncompliance. The point is that the state is not trying to be punitive. If any cities or jurisdictions are lagging behind in implementation, they want to see the plan and they want to help the city get into compliance. So, and again, we don't really have a concern for the city of Morro Bay for that timeline. So Morro Bay Ordinance number 645 and SB 1383. Essentially, this ordinance is our SB 1383 program. So it complies with SB 1383 regulations to reduce organic waste. It covers collection services, compliance and enforcement, edible food recovery, procurement, education and outreach, what we affectionately call the MWELO or the Model Water Efficient Landscaping Ordinance, and then cow grain recycling requirements. And we'll go over each of these briefly. So collection service, some of you may recall my pizza example. I won't go into that one again, but I've suffered enough internally here on the staff side. But there will be 3 canisters, or there will continue to be 3 canisters for residential and commercial customers. It just, different things will go into some of them. So the gray bin will continue to be your regular old solid waste. The blue bin will continue to be recycling, but now the green bin will in addition to like yard waste, we can also put in food waste and chicken bones and corn husks and that kind of thing, which wasn't true previously. There are going to be waivers for some commercial customers. The waivers might be based on a de minimis account where, let's say, a business is not really producing any green waste, or if there's a space constraint. And so, from what I understand, waivers are already in progress in the city of Morro Bay. We are going to have a lot of them. And so we can have more information about that to council at a future meeting, or it might be something that we just report out to council. But, moving on, so compliance and enforcement, we are going to be responsible for monitoring compliance and conducting enforcement. The enforceable mechanism of this law for the city is to adopt the ordinance that is the subject of tonight's report and presentation. Again, the first 2 years, starting on January 1st, 2022, going to January 1st, 2024, is really compliance monitoring and education. The city plans to designate IWMA to do that on our behalf. And that will include some compliance reviews, route reviews, and inspections. And the purpose will be to really educate violators, to send notices and to be part of that overall education campaign so that folks start being in compliance with the new organics rules. But in 2024 and beyond, we will continue to do compliance monitoring through the IWMA, but we'll also be required to do enforcement. So again, we'll continue to do the reviews and inspections and the notice of violations, but we will have the chance to apply penalties to violators. That's a very last resort thing, and that would be through the Code Enforcement Division in the Community Development Department. The Edible Food Recovery Program, that will be run by the IWMA. They're already working on it. It identifies Tier 1 and Tier 2 commercial edible food generators and educates them on the requirements and the food recovery organizations and services that are out there. So Tier 1, right now, what we're seeing is we have about 2 of these edible food generators. Those are the major grocery stores in the city. We won't know for some time yet whether or not we'll have any Tier 2 edible food generators, but we actually don't expect to, because that's for much larger establishments that we don't have in the city of Morro Bay. And then IWMA will be required to maintain a list of food recovery organizations. These are organizations that accept edible food that would otherwise be thrown away to help feed the homeless, etc. And the IWMA would also monitor commercial edible food generators for compliance. And again, that's after the city designates IWMA to do these things, should the city council choose. And for organics reduction, I broke it up into 2 sections. So the city procurement, we will have procurement targets. So we'll have a minimum procurement target of recovered organic waste. We'll have to purchase compost and mulch, likely to use in our parks. Potentially purchase of renewable natural gas or electricity from biomass. These are things that we're still exploring. And these targets are set by the state based on a formula on population. We'll also have a paper procurement requirement that all paper purchases will have to contain 30% post-consumer recycled content when available at the same price or less than virgin material. And the products will have to meet the FTC recyclability guidelines. Education and outreach. Again, this is an IWMA piece. They will educate all organic waste generators, commercial edible food generators, and self-haulers about relevant 1383 requirements. Education and outreach for business and residents will include education about collection service requirements, contamination standards, self-haul requirements, and overall compliance with the new law. And they'll also be reaching out to commercial edible food generators about essentially the food recovery program. Finally, a bit about the construction and landscaping ordinances or the components of the ordinance, the CalGreen and MWELO. So MWELO, really this impacts flat work or developed surface projects that would eliminate 500 or more square feet of bare or improved landscaping. And when that happens, that will trigger a review by the Community Development Department of that project. And it would affect mostly commercial developments and new single-family homes. The MWELO will also require soil amendments, compost mulch, and other post-consumer organic mulch products. And then finally, CalGreen. CalGreen enforces CalGreen's 65% construction demolition debris recovery rate requirement to ensure a maximum amount of organic waste is commingled with construction and demolition debris is recovered from building projects. Sorry for the typo. This is actually something that community development already enforces, so we're ahead of the game on that one. But it also requires space for organics collection in commercial building developments of equal to or more than 5 units, and also for multifamily residential developments equal to or more than 5 units. So those developments would just have to have space for organics collection. And finally, the recommendation is to introduce by title only and waive further reading of ordinance number 645, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Morro Bay, California, adding chapter 8.18 to title 8, Health and Safety of the Morro Bay Municipal Code, entitled Specific Regulations for Collection and Disposal Reduction of Organic Waste, Recyclables, and Solid Waste, to enact regulations in compliance with SB 1383 for the implementation of mandatory food and organics recycling and related solid waste and recycling processing and reporting. With that, as I mentioned, Janine Burlingame and Lana Lehman are on the call, so if there's any questions, I'd love to field them. I'll probably be kicking it to one of the two of them, though. Just heads up.
Good. Thanks, Greg, for that comprehensive review and the recognition of your favorite food, pizza. So with that, we'll go ahead and move to council member questions. Any questions for Greg and or folks? Councilmember Heller, sir, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So a few questions here. So it says staff is working to update the solid waste franchise agreement. So I'm wondering, what are the key issues that are being updated in this agreement, and how will council's decision tonight impact those issues, if at all?
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. I'd like to call on Lana to address that question.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. At this point in time, the ordinance probably will have the adoption of this ordinance would have little impact on the issues that are addressed in the franchise agreement, except that to the extent that we can delegate responsibilities over to Waste Connections, we would want to do that through the franchise amendment. There may at some point in time be a proposed rate increase as well from Waste Connections to cover the capital cost outlays that this new bill and these new regulations are going to require. But the ordinance before you is the general framework. The franchise agreement will narrow down some of the details, such as, for example, how contamination monitoring or complaints about any form of violation would be handled by or through or with cooperation with either Waste Connections and IWMA.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to hear that. So thank you for that.
If I could interrupt Councilmember Heller, I just also want to acknowledge, and I neglected to do so, that Jeff Claren is here with us tonight as well, and he is from Waste Connection, so he is also available for questions.
Okay. Let's see what other questions I have. Is it fair to say that the ordinance we're looking at tonight, many of these things are in place already in Morro Bay, and really it's just kind of refocusing the effort to a certain extent?
Many, I'm sorry. Many of the items that are in the ordinance presented to you tonight are not actually in your current code. And in fact, one of the future action items that may be presented to you will be a cleanup of your existing solid waste code to make sure that it's harmonized and consistent with this new code. But particularly some of the bigger issues like the food recovery requirements and the procurement requirements, those are not covered by your current code.
Right. Okay. Okay, those are questions I have. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Other council member questions? Okay, seeing no hands, I'll go ahead and open up public comment. This is public comment for item C-4 on our agenda this evening. Public comment is now open. And Anthony, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and close public comment, bring it back to council, and either entertain further discussion or a motion, if you're so inclined. Councilmember Heller, sir.
How much time do I have? Just kidding. Just kidding.
You're our expert.
Well, I'm not really, based on the questions I asked, but let me just say a couple of things here as council's representative to the Integrated Waste Management Authority. First of all, I've got to change that name of that organization because the acronym just doesn't work for anybody. This legislation is not popular with a lot of people because it came from Sacramento with no money to implement it. As you know, we live in a very progressive state. We live in a country that generates more greenhouse gas emissions per person than any country in the world. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. I feel strongly we have a serious and heavy responsibility to deal with global warming, and this legislation is a strong step in that direction. Even though it's not funded, I think there are ways to accomplish what this legislation requires without breaking the bank. As representatives of the IWMA, we are looking at, and probably know about the reorganization of the authority. We are looking at the most economical ways to accomplish these goals. Some of these tasks will be assigned and taken on by IWMA. Some of them might be taken on by the local jurisdictions, by the cities themselves. So we're going to be looking at that very closely. We don't know quite where the rate increases are going to come in play, but we do think there will need to be another digester built in North County. The question becomes who will be sharing in those costs. So there are a lot of things that have to be resolved over the next year or two in terms of rate increases. What I want to say tonight is this ordinance is a good one. It's a step in the right direction. Food waste is kind of, people wonder, well, why do we have to do anything with it? Mainly, let me just say a little bit that methane is 25 times more powerful than CO2 in its ability to capture global warming and warm the earth. It doesn't last as long in the atmosphere, but it's 25 times more powerful. For those of us who are concerned about climate change, if we can't afford to buy an electric car, there aren't too many things we can do because it seems like such a big issue, something we can't get our arms around. Dealing with organic waste is absolutely something that every one of us can do. We all eat food. We all do something with it after we clear a plate. So this is an exciting opportunity, I think, to have an impact on global warming. So I just wanted to say that pitch right there, and I will be happy to keep you posted as things evolve with the IWMA over the next few months. It's going to be very interesting. So I support this and would like to move approval of this item.
I'll second that. And Councilmember Heller, I'm just thankful that you are our IMWA, and I do agree the name needs to change. Representative, I appreciate the depth of knowledge and understanding and your articulation of the issues. I think you're right on. Thank you for raising the broader issue of climate change and helping us to understand that understanding of the toxic contributions of methane gas to the environment. So I really appreciate that. And again, thank you for the educational session you did. Maybe it was last week or the week before when you were available to answer questions to our community. So appreciate you for that. There is a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the item?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, an annoying procedural item.
Oh, yes. You want to
read the full title of the ordinance just to comply with state law.
Councilmember Heller, would you mind reading the staff recommendation?
See if I can pull it up here.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Chris.
Boy, Chris, you just had to do that. Let's see.
It's page 309.
Thank you very much. Out here. Okay.
That helps, yeah.
So the entire recommendation, or just the subject? The entire recommendation?
Recommendation, yes, sir.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. I do it all the time.
I know you do. I know you do.
Councilmember Heller, the alternative is we read the whole ordinance.
Oh, you're
the record. So actually, this is the shortcut under state law. So
don't challenge me. I'll read it.
Yeah.
So I move staff recommends the City Council introduce by title only and waive further reading of ordinance number 645, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Morro Bay, California, adding chapter 8.18 to title 8 Health and Safety of the Morro Bay Municipal Code, entitled Specific Regulations for Collection and Disposal Reduction of Organic Waste, Recyclables, and Solid Waste, to enact regulations in compliance with Senate Bill SB 1383 for the implementation of mandatory food and organics recycling and related solid waste and recycling processing and reporting, and anything else Chris wants me to say.
You got it. I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second by...
Sorry we had to make it so long.
That's okay.
Lana, if you're working in the same firm as Chris, we understand it. So not a problem. With that, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll ask for a roll call vote. I just have one comment, Mayor. Yes, please. Councilmember.
I support the motion, and I want to echo Councilmember Heller's comments and just push a little farther to say that I think that the climate crisis is the biggest existential emergency that we've ever faced. And so it's critically important in that context that we do everything we can. I think it's more than just addressing climate or addressing global warming, but we're in a serious state of emergency. And as a coastal community, I think it's imperative that we take all of the steps within reach to make a difference.
Thank you, Councilmember Addis. All right, we'll go ahead and call for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis.
Yes.
Councilmember Barton.
Yes.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Councilmember Heller.
Yes.
And Mayor Heading.
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. That concludes this item. Thank you, Lana, for being here. We appreciate that. And Greg, very much appreciate your comprehensive presentation tonight. All right, that brings us to item C-5. This is the Kings and Blanca Tanks Rehabilitation Project Contract Award in the amount of $2,039,268 to Superior Tank Solutions. And let me call to your attention, there was an addendum that was sent out late this afternoon, so hopefully you've had the chance to review that. And I will turn that over to Mr. Liebig, sir. I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to share my screen also. And I guess I should have tested this out also before I got on here. I upgraded to OS Monterey on my Mac, and I'm not going to share my screen. I'm just going to go through the staff presentation. This is a water contract for our tank rehabilitation project. This is a project that comes out of our One Water plan for water delivery system improvements. And it is for the rehabilitation of two welded steel tanks at the Kings location, which is just north of Kings Avenue between Carmel and Pacho on State Park property, and then the four steel tanks at the Blanca tank site, which is just north of Blanca Street and just outside the city limits. This is complete rehabilitation of 6 storage tanks, replacement of internal and external coatings, replacement of some appurtenant features such as access ladders, handrails, hatches, and such, installation of the OSHA required fall protection equipment, and we had an engineer's estimate of $2,633,900. The Kings water storage tank sites, I sure wish I could share my screen. I have some beautiful pictures of these rusting tanks there on Kings Avenue. We have a 1 million gallon tank that was constructed in 1969 and a 1.5 million gallon tank that was added to the site in 1996. The Blanca tanks, like I said, are just north of Blanca Street in the unincorporated area on a city-owned parcel. We have two 0.18 million gallon bolted steel tanks that were installed in 1964, and then two 0.11 million gallon tanks that were added in 2005. The project was advertised on July 14th, 2021, and there was a typo in the staff report. Only 3 addenda were issued, extending the bid date, clarifying specifications, and revising the bid sheet. Bids were opened and read aloud on October 21st, 2021, and the bid results came from Superior Tank Solutions, Paso Robles Tank, United Field Solutions, Utility Services Company, and they range from the apparent low bidder in their corrected bid. There was a few math errors in all the bids of $2,039,268 to the high bid of United Field Solutions of $4,692,075. The city did receive a bid protest from Paso Robles Tank on September 21st. The claim was that the Superior Tank Solutions bid was unbalanced by way of listing subcontractor balances and scope of work. We asked Superior Tank Solutions to respond to that bid, and their response to a number of items and comes down to that the protest was not based in fact, and it was based on conjecture on the part of Paso Robles Tank. We worked with our city attorney's office and determined that there was not sufficient legal grounds for the city council to award the bid to Paso Robles Tank. The city attorney and staff recommend rejecting the protest and awarding the project to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Superior Tank Solutions. After publication of the staff report, Paso Robles Tank responded with additional points on their protest on November 5th. Superior Tank Solutions provided their response on November 8th. That was provided in a supplement to the staff report today, and it does not change the recommendation from staff or the city attorney. Financial impact of this project: the project is within the fiscal year 2021-22 budget. The budget amount for this project was $2,691,152. And because of this project has a 300 working day schedule, we will take a future action to carry a portion of the budget over to the next fiscal year to complete the project. With that, staff recommends that City Council waive the minor irregularities in the bids received by the city, reject the bid protest filed by Paso Robles Tank Incorporated, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Superior Tank Solutions in the amount of $2,039,268 for recoating and rehabilitation of 6 water storage tanks after the contract's been approved to form by the city attorney's office. That concludes my presentation. I apologize for not checking the settings that I need to do on this new operating system.
No worries. Hey, thank you, Rob, for that excellent report. Very comprehensive, and thanks for providing the information in the staff report regarding the detailed descriptions of the items involved in the budget. I appreciate that very much. So with that, I'm going to open up it for questions. Any council members have questions for Rob on this item? Councilmember Heller.
A lot of questions tonight. Rob, some community members have asked me if it'd be possible to paint the tanks a different color than they are now. Is that a possibility to involve them without making a major deal out of it?
I believe it is a possibility. We would need to work with Paso Robles Tank on, if we pick a standard color, I don't believe there will be any change in costs, but if we pick something too exotic, I'm sure there will be a change order cost, but we will talk with, Superior Tank Solutions regarding that.
Okay, great. That's my only question. Thank you.
to find my pointer there. Thank you, Councilmember Heller. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and open up public comment. Public comment is now open on item C-5. And Anthony, do we have any public comment on this?
Thank you, Mayor. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Okay, I'll close public comment, bring it back to council. And I will go ahead and let's see, I'll make a motion that City Council waive the minor irregularities in the bids received by the city, reject the bid protest filed by Paso Robles Tank Incorporated, and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Superior Tank Solutions, STS, in the amount of $2,039,268 for recoating and rehabilitation of 6 water storage tanks after approved as to the form by the city attorney.
A second.
Motion by Mayor Heading for the staff recommendation, second by Council Member Heller. Any further comments or discussion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Addis?
Yes.
Councilmember Barton?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Heller?
Yes.
And Mayor Heading?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great. And Rob, thank you for that. I appreciate it very much. It's great to see it come in under budget. And we look forward to the restoration of the One Water capital project. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Heller, what color was the inquiry about?
Purple.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
I love it. Yeah. All right. We're at item D, council declaration of future agenda items. I do have one. We have weighed in tonight on the county redistricting, and I think it would be beneficial to include on a special meeting agenda, which we're probably going to be having a special meeting. The state redistricting will be occurring. The first maps are going to be out tomorrow for a 14-day comment period. And some of the visualizations show a split in San Luis Obispo County. Again, these are state maps. I believe it'll benefit Morro Bay for SLO County to stay unified within one district at the state and congressional levels due to our unique characteristics, being coastal and rural, our tourism economy, our green energy hub, etc. And I'd like to agendize a report similar to the one we had for our county agenda item this evening, to allow the mayor to weigh in on the state issue regarding the state maps. Looking for, okay, Jeff's good with that. Is there another head nod?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Looks like we have full council support for that. I appreciate that. Any other future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. The next regular meeting of the Morro Bay City Council will be held on Tuesday, December 14th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. However, we do have a special meeting tomorrow, November 10th, Wednesday, at 4 p.m. This is our meeting to consider city goals. And with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for your time, great efforts. Have a very pleasant evening. Stay safe and be well.
Night, everyone.
Night. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Nice hack, Greg.
Nice hack, Greg.
Wisdom.
He's halfway out the door.